Hey, warmer brother low, welcome to lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. We've got an excellent podcast for you. Joining me in segment number 2, it is Eli Boettger. He is the founder of the wonderful network Heat Check CBB. We're going to be talking about what we've all gotten thus far this season. Something that I've been mentioning on this show / podcast is it feels like you really do have like your top 10, top 15 teams really tearing it up, and then teams like 20 through 70 feel very equally knit on the same playing field. We're going to be talking about sort of my crackpot theory there, and we're going to be diving into what we're going to be getting in the ACC-SEC challenge as well. It used to be ACC Big Ten challenge, a little bit of a change-a-rooney this year, so we're going to have fun talking about that with Eli in segment number 2. In the final segment, going to get you guys picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this College Basketball Tuesday, as we had some bank shots. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you do have one of two ways to be able to further this in. First one is my Twitter / X timeline at @unit_D1. Keep in mind the letters EM. Naming does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. And the other way, find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. And then from there, you're able to fire on whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. Did not get in any Twitter / X questions today, and it was a relatively small slate of college basketball on Monday, but it was a fun one. Let's take a look back at it. Try to find some trends and try to get to know these teams a little bit better.
Games from yesterday is Greg buzzing about. Here is the rowdy recap.
Now, because the Greg Peterson experience on the West Coast is Monday through Thursday from 9 to midnight, that would be midnight to 3 out there on the East Coast. I do have to do this before we knew the final of Utah versus St. Mary's, so if anything notable happens there, I will recap that. But what we saw on Monday was a nice upset from Oakland, 78-76. They get the job done outright against Xavier as a 14.5-point underdog. And for Oakland, this isn't the first time they scared a big-time foe. This was the first time they were able to bust through, but they lose by 11 against Illinois. They hang in there to the tune of single digits against Ohio State. And Trey Townsend, he was tremendous. 28 points, 7 assists, 6 rebounds. Rocket Watts gave you 7 points. Shock, surprise, surprise. But you were able to get 15 points, 6 boards as well out of Chris Conway. Defense is much better this year with Oakland than it has been in past years. And Xavier, just a little bit of a work in progress. Some of the guys that they brought in via the transfer portal, Davion McKnight, Quincy Oliveri, just need a little bit more than a combined 15 points on 2 of 6 3-point shooting out of them. Desmond Claude was able to chip in there 24, but very good win for Oakland, who looks very lively out there in the Rising League. Something that has been happening the last 2 weeks is that I have been as cold as ice with my write-ups, and I take the over in St. Peter's versus Rutgers, and I can't remember the last time a team had 10 more turnovers than made field goals, but yep, I picked this game, and that's what happened. 71-40, I had the over, and Rutgers, they get the cover easily. Total of 123.5, didn't stand a chance of going over because St. Peter's, they just couldn't hold on to the ball. When you turn the ball over 23 times, it makes life very difficult. They did get 16 and 12, though, out of Michael Hoagie, so that was a good sign for them, but for Rutgers, just a complete masterclass on defense. Noah Fernandez, 19 points. We were waiting for him to be able to bust out. Cliff Amarui, 17 points, 4 blocks, 8 rebounds. So Rutgers, ever since that season opening loss to Princeton, and it's a good Princeton team. They have been rock solid. The A-10 has been looking a little bit more deep than many of us were expecting this year as well. And Fordham, they've made a statement against Manhattan on Monday, 93-61, as for Fordham, 9 of 26 from 3-point range. They forced Manhattan into 20 turnovers, but fortunately Manhattan was able to get 25 made field goals. But how about for Fordham? You get Soft Metters just continuing to get it done. 16 points, 6 assists. He's been very good in this backcourt, so a nice solid win there. We're starting to see a lot of totals hitting north of 160. UMBC versus Hampton was one of those games. This total closes right around about 165, 166. Does not go over. 80-76 the final, as these two teams, they went a combined 8 of 38 from 3-point range, and they had a combined 37 turnovers. Hard to be able to hit an over when you got that, but this total that was in the neighborhood of about a 164, 164.5, just barely goes over. TCU all over Houston Christian, 101-64. Now, I personally want to see a little bit more out of TCU because they have played Houston Christian, Mississippi Valley State, Alcorn State, UT Rio Grande Valley, Omaha, and Southern. That is not the monsters of the Midway, but they look very impressive on offense right now. They were able to shoot about 58% from the floor in Houston Christian. 24 turnovers in this game. They were able to do actually a halfway decent job on the glass, winning that battle 36-31. But when you're not getting up shots for second chances, that'll skew the rebounds a little bit. And for Northern Illinois, they were trying to come off of Prosperity, knocking off DePaul, even though I don't know how big of a win it is at this point with where DePaul is. But Northwestern sent them back to reality, 89-67 the final. As for Northwestern, a sizzler of 9 of 19 from three-point range with Boo Buie. 23 points, 7 assists, just 2 turnovers, goes 4 of 5 from three-point range. Northwestern wins the turnover battle 11-7. They win the rebound battle 33-25. And for Northern Illinois, you were able to get 26 big points out of Xavier Amos. The rest of the team had a little bit of a rough go of it, and also a little bit of a rough go of it if you had Eastern Kentucky. Eastern Kentucky was in full control of this game. They were up 75-68. Looks like you were going to cruise to an over, and you were going to be able to get a cover, and then they scored 2 points in the final, 3:47 for that game against Troy to land 77-76. You're listening to someone who did have Eastern Kentucky in that game, and there has been a lot of volatility in general, and it's always volatile when you've got a Wisconsin game, but Western Illinois, they were able to get within the 27.5. They cover against Wisconsin in what is just a traditional Wisconsin game, 71-49 the final for Western Illinois. They go 15 of 38 from the floor. They took 38 field goals in 40 minutes. That's really hard to do with the shot clock. That said, for Wisconsin, balanced scoring here. Tyler Wall, AJ Soar, Chucky Hepburn, and Stephen Krall all had between 12 and 13 points. So Wisconsin never in danger in this one, but unable to get the cover. And if you're taking a look at college basketball right now, we have been seeing quite a few overs, which is why we are seeing some more harebrained totals recently. And with regards to what we all saw on Monday, the games that have went final, we had a few more unders and overs, so a lot pending. So we shall see there. But overall for the season, games are going over at about a 52.1% clip as I record this, 520 overs, 479 unders, and along the way, I believe that we've gotten something like 8 pushes. Favorites, they're currently hitting at a 50.7% clip, 503, 489, and 16 against the spread, but that's been drying up a little bit. And home underdogs, 110, 119, and 6 against the spread. It's been a real rough run of it for those home underdogs. And if you take a look at the last 7 days in college basketball, certainly the overs have been overwhelming. Nearly 55%, 169 overs to 139 unders. And in that time span, favorites hitting at just 48%, 146, 158, and 6 against the spread. So that's what we're seeing in college basketball right now, and that's what we all got on Monday. Now, let's turn it forward to this ACC-SEC challenge. Let's talk to Eli Boettger of HeatCheck CBB about some of the teams that he's bullish and bearish on, and just what he's made out of the first few weeks of the season. That's up next right here on Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Peterson, now a part of the Beats and Family Podcast.
Sports Betting Innovative Analytics has taken the guesswork and emotion out of sports betting to bring you an innovative and trustworthy resource to enhance your journey to becoming a winning player. With industry-leading money-back guarantee options backed by their sophisticated modeling, they want to introduce you to a system that's not widely seen or available to help you beat the bookmaker. Specializing in NBA, college basketball, and WNBA, your first week is always free. Get started at SBIA1.com today.
And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Peterson, now part of the Beats and Family Podcast, and it is always great to be joined by this man as we've got Eli Boettger aboard. He does a tremendous job over at HeatCheck CBB. He is a founder of that tremendous website and that just overall network. They do a great job taking a look at this game of college basketball all 12 months out of the year. The writers are really second to none. They go into so much depth and insight, and you guys know them from all the great work that they did over at the Almanac as well. To be able to follow Eli on Twitter/X, that is his last name, Boettger, Boettger, and underscore, and then his first name, Eli, all together. And Eli, it's always great to get you aboard. Thank you.
Absolutely, Greg. It's always a great time to hop on and chat college hoops with you, so thank you again for having me on.
Absolutely. It's great to have you aboard. And Eli, we are through about 2.5 to 3 weeks of the season thus far. And what have been some of your overall thoughts as to what we have seen thus far this season? Because it feels like right when we get this game of college basketball figured out, we always get thrown for a little bit of a monkey wrench.
Yes, absolutely. There's always something going on that makes things a little bit more challenging to project moving forward. But it does feel like there's a pretty strong stable of, I'd say, about a half dozen teams atop the national ladder right now. I think most of them would be pretty easy to identify, such as Purdue, Arizona, UConn, Marquette. I'll probably throw Kansas in there, and maybe you could also make an argument for Houston or Baylor, maybe even Duke or Kentucky in that range. But each of these teams, they certainly aren't perfect, but they have shown to play at a pretty high level so far this season. And of course, they're going to drop games along the way. For example, Tennessee dropped a pair of games. Of course, Feast Week is going to serve that up when a lot of these highly ranked teams are matched up against one another. But I think by and large, from at least the preseason AP poll to now, and I know it's just been about 3 weeks, as you said, but there hasn't been any substantial decline from any of the preseason AP, say, top 5 or top 10 teams. There hasn't been one team in particular that has just absolutely cratered. And maybe the first one that comes to mind is Michigan State. But 3-3, they had this surprising home loss against James Madison, which, of course, still hasn't even lost a game on the year. So we'll see how that loss kind of matures over time. But a neutral site loss to Duke, in which they're competitive, and a neutral site loss to Arizona, in which they're competitive. It was maybe somewhat shocking out of the gates that Michigan State lost to James Madison, but even in the Spartans' case, I'm not exactly pushing the panic button here at 3-3 when they'll probably wind up with one of the more difficult non-conference slates that we see in college basketball. So the long-winded answer here is I think a lot of these teams that we projected to be really good entering the season have shown that they have the chops to probably make do on those preseason prognostications.
Yep, I do think that they are going to be able to cash in on those. And I do take a look at the top teams in all of college basketball. I think that there's just a big divide as well, because from my side of things in terms of sports betting, the teams that have been 25 plus point favorites, they've all been able to cover, but it's been these teams that have been sort of like mid-range favorites, like when you've got team number 22 going up against team number 57, where there's a lot of anarchy. And I'm not sure if you've noticed that or not, but it feels like the top of the top, your Purdue's, your Kansas's. I would be willing to throw Duke in there as well. Teams like this, I feel like they're much better than those teams that are more in like the 10 to 15 range. But once you get outside that, like top 8, top 10, it feels very equal from like the teams 10 through 50, teams 10 through 60, when you get sort of into that tier, whereas in the top 10, I feel like they're very much a clear cut above everyone else.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that, like, going back to your earlier point, that there's a pretty solid contender of tier A or tier 1A and 1B, whatever you want to call it, atop the national ladder. And then it's a whole mix of a bunch of teams that we could see, at least I could see, being probably Elite 8 quality or maybe even Final Four given the right draw. But then from there, it gets pretty fascinating, because what we have seen, and I'd be really curious to see what the numbers look like year over year, but it feels like a lot of these bye games that used to be gimmies for some of these high major teams, they're just not the same way that they used to be anymore. I think that the average mid-major team looks a lot better than it used to. And now the weakest high major teams are probably a lot weaker than they used to be. Just taking a look at some of these teams that have struggled, and this list can go on, and we saw that in the first week of the season, but Big 12's had some teams that have dropped some early games that probably shouldn't have. Oklahoma State, West Virginia, UCF is probably all in that mix. DePaul is now off to a 1-5 start. They've had some really tough L's on their schedules so far. Georgetown's had now a couple of close calls. They just barely snuck past both American and Jackson State at home, and also had a home loss against Holy Cross. And this is a team that maybe wasn't expected to contend for an NCAA tournament berth, but they're also expected to be a lot better under Ed Cooley than they were with Patrick Ewing. The list kind of goes on and on. Penn State has had its challenges. Maryland has had its challenges as well. I think that the difference, again, between some of the better mid-majors and the weaker high majors, that margin is just so much thinner than it used to be even 5 or so years ago. And I think a lot of it has to do with the transfer portal. Ultimately, what it means is there's probably going to be a handful of mid-majors that find their way onto the bubble later in the year, while some of those spots that used to be occupied occupied by high majors could be changing hands a little bit. So we'll see. Obviously, we're just three weeks into this, but I do think it is a possible storyline to monitor, especially now that we're kind of coming out of feast week. It's going to be a handful of bye games once we're past the conference challenge portion of the schedule. And I think especially as some of these players are looking ahead to the holidays or looking ahead to bigger games on the conference side of the schedule, there could be some surprising upsets here in the next few weeks. So it could definitely be something to monitor.
No doubt. I do think that is something that we do want to be mindful of. And right when you think that things are all figured out and it's like, oh, here are the top teams, here are the bottom teams, here are the teams that are somewhere in the middle, boom, you do get hit with those upsets. So always expect the unexpected. As Eli Boettger does amazing work over at eCheck CBB, is joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops. And Eli, are there a few teams in general that you've taken a look at thus far this season and either you were a little bit higher on them coming in and they've disappointed, or vice versa, you're maybe a little bit low on them and they've really caught you by surprise thus far?
Yeah, I think the first one that comes to mind on the positive end is Marquette, and I know that their most recent game that they played was a loss to Purdue in the Maui Invitational. I wasn't nearly as bullish on the Golden Eagles as a lot of other people were. I thought that this is a team that was obviously very, very strong last season. They ran it back in large part, but I just wasn't quite buying that the defense was going to be all that much better. I still think that there are some limitations within the roster, but Marquette looked awesome in Maui. And I know Purdue was the team that ended up taking home the trophy. But gosh, I think the overall speed and athleticism of this group, and also Iguodaro looked phenomenal. I think he's kind of this guy who's probably capable of taking that next leap and being one of the best players in the Big East. Tyler Kolek, he is who we thought he was always going to be. But even some of the lesser-known guys, like Sean Jones, a 5'10 guard who might even be generously listed at 5'10, just the way that he is able to impact a game with his speed and his awareness. I think he just has a great feel for the game. And that's a big element for this Marquette team. You have to have some of those bench guys or some of those depth pieces if you're going to compete for a national title. And even though they didn't win against Purdue and they trailed much of the game, I thought they had a pretty admirable showing against the Boilermakers, but the prior two games were kind of the eyebrow raises for me because they had UCLA matchup where they trailed by as many as 12 and I believe ripped off a 17-0 run, if I'm not mistaken, which showed a lot of stuff on Marquette's end. And then to basically control from tip to final buzzer against Kansas and winning that game by 14 points against the number one team in America at that point, that was a statement victory. And already to this point, Marquette's racked up wins against Illinois, UCLA, and Kansas all away from home. So not only is this a team that looks pretty good, but they already have, and again, 3 weeks into the season, but they already have three really nice wins that should age pretty gracefully away from Milwaukee. So Marquette's obviously going to be a team to monitor. They've been better than what I anticipated. I've also been really intrigued by BYU. They've been a team that's gotten off to a really strong start here. They had the quality win in the first week of the season against San Diego State, and they just picked up a pair of high major wins against ASU and NC State on a neutral floor and looked pretty dominant in doing so. And already BYU's up to 10th in KenPom, and that is not a figure that I was expecting anytime soon. If you had to guess any WCC teams ranked 10th in KenPom at this point in the season, I think my first choice would be Gonzaga, second would be St. Mary's, and I think BYU would have been my third.
BYU now in the Big 12, by the way.
Right. Oh, right. You're now the Big 12 contender in BYU. Yeah, good point. See, we're still getting used to things here in the realignment world. That's the other thing too, and I think you bring up a good point, Greg. Not only the obvious that BYU is in the Big 12, but also just the fact that it's going to be pretty fascinating to see just how this team contends when they are going to enter these stretches where they have to play the likes of Kansas and Houston and Texas Tech and so on and so forth, because we've gotten acclimated to BYU's season really shaking down to whether or not they can go 1-1 against Gonzaga or whether they can go 1-1 against St. Mary's or so on and so forth. But gosh, they're going to have a chance pretty much every night from here on out the rest of the season to pick up quality wins. So I've been intrigued by BYU. I think they've got some really nice scorers on this team. Not a group that has all that much size in the front court, but as far as the backcourt is concerned, Dallin Hall, Trevin Nell, Spencer Johnson, a lot of these guys can put it on the floor. They can shoot from the perimeter. It's going to be a fun team. I don't know if BYU is going to stick around and be that top 10 type of KenPom team all season long, but at least so far, they've been really impressive from the jump. I'm curious what they do from here on out, and especially, as you noted, instead of the WCC entering Big 12 play. So we'll see how that shakes out for the Cougars.
Oh, with BYU, I have been thoroughly impressed by them as well. This team could just absolutely bomb it from three-point range. So I'm in agreement with you there. They are a team that I have been very impressed by during the early portion of the season. And I do want to get your thoughts on this as well, because now with a lot of these teams, they played in the neighborhood of about 5 to 6 games for a lot of these teams. You might have a team or two that's played like 7 or 8. You might have a few teams like Dartmouth that has played more like 3 or 4. But how much of a sample size do you need before you buy into a team? Or is it just a varies by the situation sort of ordeal? Because I do think that it is very tricky to be like, all right, this team is completely different than what they were a season ago, or to just chalk it up to, hey, this team had a little bit of bad/good variance to begin the season.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I'll give you an example here. You have to give the team some time, because especially with the roster that is turning over a lot of pieces, like, for example, Marquette, which brings back almost everyone, they should be closer to a final product than a roster like, say, Kentucky, which is mostly freshmen or transfers or newcomers. Same deal with Gonzaga. They've got a lot of new pieces coming in. It's not the same Drew Timme, Julian Strother type Gonzaga team that we've seen in years past. So it does depend on the roster, but a particular example here would be Florida Atlantic, which just last Saturday had a pretty shocking home loss to Bryant, in which they just could not score the basketball. They had 52 points on 72 possessions, really struggled to score against a Bryant team that now, without Jared Grasso on the sidelines, it's a very different team than what we've seen in the last handful of years out of Bryant. But the way that Florida Atlantic responded, because I think it would be fairly easy, and I did see some murmurs of this maybe not being the same FAU team that we saw reach the Final Four last year, that just mowed through their regular season schedule. FAU responded by winning 3 straight in the ESPN Events Invitational, highlighted by a 34-point win against Virginia Tech on Sunday, as well as a really nice win over a top 15 team in Texas A&M on Friday night. So FAU is an example. Like, you can't give up on these teams too early, because they can respond pretty quickly, especially if it's a roster that has quite a bit of continuity and experience. I think those teams in particular are able to bounce back a lot quicker than maybe your freshman and transfer-led teams. But it takes some time, and I think we'll have a better idea once January rolls around. But we've seen in years past, a lot of the teams that succeed in these MTEs or the neutral site invitationals do seem to have a lot of success once March rolls around. So it could be something to monitor as well.
Yep, I do think that is going to be something to monitor, as Eli Boettger, who does amazing work over at HX CBB, is joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops. And Eli, it is going to be so interesting to gauge these games moving forward, because we are now starting to get out of a lot of the multi-team events / these tournaments that we saw the last week or two. Obviously, when it comes to Christmas, we are going to be getting the old Diamond Egg Classic. But I do take a look at this game that's going to be going down on Tuesday between Miami and Kentucky. That's part of the ACC versus SEC challenge. Typically, it would be the Big Ten ACC challenge, but now I guess they decide, you know what, we don't have an equal amount of teams and things like that moving forward. So they change it around a little bit. And how much you take a look at this game and just the challenge as a whole, because I think that it's going to be very fascinating to watch these games the next few days. And I think that's really going to be a good measuring stick of something that we were talking about, trying to gauge if these teams are real or for not. And I think we're going to find out a lot about all the teams in these conferences the next week or so.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's an intriguing matchup, and the ACC-SEC challenge should produce a lot of really good games. I know Duke on Arkansas is also on the slate, which should be pretty fascinating, in the inaugural ACC-SEC challenge here. But as far as Kentucky and Miami are concerned, I'm most intrigued with what these teams are going to do as far as the defensive end, because it should be pretty obvious by now that both Miami and Kentucky have plenty of offensive firepower. Of course, Miami with Nigel Pack, with Luga Poplar, who's been really, really strong to start the year. I think he's still shooting somewhere around like 55% from deep or something ridiculous like that. Norchad Omier, of course, who's got Final Four experience with last year's team. There's a lot of scoring on this roster, and I think the same can be said for Kentucky as well. Rob Dillingham's been just phenomenal so far. He's a guy who I thought wasn't getting enough publicity in comparison to some of the other freshmen on this Kentucky roster. But it's going to come down for both these teams, and this is more wide-ranging as opposed to what we'll see Tuesday night, but for their seasons to unfold the way that they hope, and I'd say pretty confidently that both Miami and Kentucky reasonably have Final Four sights heading into the season. They just have to be strong on the defensive end. And I think Kentucky now, under John Calipari, they have a roster that I think is a lot better built than what the previous year's rosters have been. It just seems a little bit more fluid. There's more shot making on this year's team than there has been in years past. It just feels like a more fluid roster, but it's going to come down to the guys like Trey Mitchell. What's he going to be able to do on the defensive end underneath for Kentucky, and maybe some of these younger guys as well, if they're able to step up and be those types of defensive anchors that is especially needed in the SEC, because this is one of the stronger defensive conferences in all of college basketball, if not the strongest. And if they're not ready to play, then that's going to be tough to scratch out the necessary wins to get into the, say, top 2, top 3 seed lines. And for Miami as well, Jim Larenega's had some really good teams these last just handful of seasons. They've won 7 NCAA tournament games the last 2 years combined, but for them to cash in and to be one of the legitimate ACC contenders along with, say, Duke or North Carolina, for them as well, they need to get some contributions out of their maybe lesser-known guys. What is Matthew Cleveland going to bring to the table, or Bensley Joseph, some of those players? And if they can step up and be the defensive anchors that is needed, then I like the potential of Miami moving forward. And this is the roster that I liked entering this season as well. So should be a really fun matchup. And some different flavor now, as you mentioned, moving away from the Big Ten ACC Challenge. It's going to be different. It's going to be unique, but it still should present a lot of quality matchups. I'm definitely intrigued by what we see.
Without question, I think that we're going to get some really good matchups coming in the next week or two. And then when we do get the Big East versus Big 12 Challenge, that's going to be going on more towards the later part of the week this week into next week. Man, that is going to be just a complete banger. And I can tell you right now, Eli is going to be doing a tremendous job taking a look at all these games, as everyone over there at HXCBB, they do A-plus work. Eli, I know that you're hard at work taking a look at a little bit of everything in college basketball right now. You and all the other great writers, you spend all 12 months of the year taking a look at this sport that we all know and love. So let the good people at home know what's on tap for you and how people can follow along on social media and other platforms.
Absolutely, Greg. I always appreciate taking the time to have me on. Appreciate it as always. You can find our stuff on heatcheckcbb.com. All of our social media handles are at heatcheckcbb as well. And past Feast Week, we know a little bit more about these teams, and we're excited to see what December holds for all of college basketball. So we're excited.
Oh, it is going to be absolutely tremendous. And Eli, he does such a good job taking a look at this game that we all know and love, and was great to be able to get him aboard today. A big thanks to Eli for joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN family of podcasts. And coming up next, it is that time of the podcast. I give you picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this College Basketball Tuesday as we hit some bank shots. And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN family of podcasts. It is always great to get Eli Boettger aboard. He does amazing work over at HXCBB, the founder of that wonderful platform. Taking a look at this great game of basketball that we all know and love every single time he joins this podcast. He lends such good insights, and he does this thing 12 months out of the year, much like myself. Very hard at work, taking a look at what we're all getting out there on the court. So big thanks to Eli for joining me in the last segment. Now it is that time of the podcast. I give you picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this College Basketball Tuesday as we hit some bank shots.
Most financial establishments close at a certain time, but not here. It is time for a side and total on every game on today's betting board bank shots.
Do you note that as per usual, any changes that are made to these plays will be listed up on my Twitter/X feed at Junit_81, and we are going to be going in Las Vegas rotation order. This is where we go with the games with 3 digits on the rotation first, and then the games involving smaller conferences are going to have 6 digits, and those are at the bottom, and both go in time order. So the SWAC, the MEAC, the Big South, the America East, Atlantic Sun. Trying to think if I forgot any. Southland, those are going to be at the bottom, and then all the other games, they have 3 digits and they're at the top. So let's get things started with 601, 602 on the betting board. It is Georgia Southern, and they're on the road. They're facing off against Michigan State. Michigan State, a 25.5 to a 26.5 point favorite, and your totals between 137.5 and 138.5. I set mine at 23.5. Michigan State certainly seems like they're starting to right the ship, but you have to feel like there might have been a little bit of a glass ceiling on this team coming into the season. They're a very veteran group, but didn't feel like there were necessarily too many ways for these veterans to improve overly much. And I think the way that they really will be able to improve moving forward is getting the young guys more minutes. Guys like Xavier Booker or Carson Cooper, which I know that Tom Izzo typically is a little bit more against, but these are the guys I think provide a little bit more upside than some like a Matty Sissoko. Ty Walker has been an incredible scorer for this Michigan State team, 22 points per contest. They don't have anyone giving you north of 10.5 points per game, so you've got some question marks as to who's going to be able to step up around Walker. And then when it comes to Georgia Southern, they've been putting the ball in the hands of Deuce Dean a lot this far this season. Comes over from Hampton, where he was a little bit of a do-it-all player. Then the one thing that really has never been able to do in his career is shoot threes. Career 27.5% three-point shooter. He has been able to give the team multiple assists, 13 points per game, but he needs a little bit more reliable scoring around him to be successful. The team overall shooting about 39.5% from the floor, 32.5% from three, with nearly 15 turnovers per contest. Now, down low, I do think that they should be able to get more moving forward out of Carlos Curry, who last season, this guy was solid. He was able to give the team 7 points, 7 boards. They just haven't been giving him a lot of minutes, and I'm not quite sure why. You've had Cam Bryan be able to chip in there right around 5 boards per contest. He's been able to ascend a little bit, but now he's out of the fold, which I have to think is going to lead to a few more minutes for him. And then when it comes to Avante Parker, he's been able to step up as a 6'9" freshman, being able to give the team right around 5 boards per contest. But the real X factor in this team staying lively is the South Alabama transfer, Injamar Franklin. Last season out there in the Sun Belt, averaged right around 5 points on 35.5% three-point shooting. Like what he's able to bring to the table, and this is a Georgia Southern team that does have 3 other top 4 scorers, averaging at least a steal per contest as well. That does include the aforementioned injured Bryant, who I'm thinking is going to be out for this game, but there is a chance that he might be able to be cleared for this one. But I do think that with Michigan State, the way that they've been inconsistent with their three-point shooting, still shooting less than 30% from 3, does cause some question marks against the Georgia Southern team that they've been having a little bit of a rough time with their defense, to say the least, giving up at least 80 points in each of their last 4 games, but their offense has ascended as well, with 68 plus in 3 out of their last 4 as well. So interesting circumstances, something's got to give. Michigan State is playing a little bit lower tempo, but I do think that they're going to be able to explode a little bit more in this game, which is why I did set my total at a 141.5. Georgia Southern has been pretty miserable with their defense, so looking at the over, and I think the Michigan State wins this game handily. I think we've gone a little bit too far, though. I'm going to be willing to take 26.5 here with Georgia Southern and this total over. 6-3, 6-4 on the betting board. Southern Illinois, it's a road face-off against Indiana State. The Sycamores are a 4.5 to a 5.5 point favorite, with your total between 146.5 and 148.5. Did set my total at a 147, so here at 147.5, 148.5. The opener was 148.5. I'm going to be willing to dive in on the under. You've got a Southern Illinois bunch that they love to be able to play super low and slow, a traditional bottom 100 team in terms of total possessions per game. Meanwhile, for Missouri State, ever since Josh Schertz has got there, they've been able to run it and gun it. But with Indiana State, they were actually quite good with their defense last year. A top 75 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. They are coming off of giving up 74 plus in each of their last 3 games. But when you're playing against Rice, Pepperdine, and Toledo, that is much different. Those are super duper up-tempo teams. So I don't think that that's really an indicator of this defense being a little bit more shoddy this year. I think that that's just an indicator that they played some really tough offensive teams. You've gotten great production out of Isaac Swope, who's been able to come in, shoot 49% from 3-point range with 2.5 steals per game, and he shot well over 40% from 3 over at Southern Indiana season ago. I do think that we're going to see a little bit of a fall off there, but that's been big. What else you want to be taking note of is that Robbie Avila has been dealing with a little bit of an injury, but should be good to go in this one. Was able to play in the last 2 in the event out there in Las Vegas, and having him back has been big because he's 6'10", 18 points, 7 boards, 5 assists. He is a point forward for the team and just makes such good contributions that really takes the pressure off of guys like Julian Larry, Xavier Bledson in the backcourt, who are combining for about 8.5 assists per game. And this is just a very top-heavy Southern Illinois team. While you've got so many options with Indiana State, for Southern Illinois, you've got Xavier Johnson trying to do it all. He's trying to be like what Marcus Tomask was a season ago. 5.5 assists, 1.5 steals, 23 points per game for Xavier Johnson, shooting darn near 40% from 3. And to the credit of Southern Illinois, they're shooting 39.5% from 3. I do think that there's going to be a little bit of drop-off. You've got Trent Brown right now shooting 60% from 3, and he's a good three-point shooter. He shoots for his career about 35% from 3, but we should be seeing that taper off. Clarence Rupert has been able to give you about 7 rebounds per game, but other than Johnson, you only have one other player giving you north of 9.5 points per game, Jovan Stulic, who comes over from Little Rock, where he was coming off of an injury last year, 2 years ago. Was able to give the team right around 8 points and shot about 44% from three as a 6'6" combo player. But I do think that with Southern Illinois, they're going to be looking to try to keep things a little bit more slow, a little bit more control. But I just don't know how they're going to be able to match up with Robbie Avila, and that'll open things up for the backcourt. Going to be a little bit more of a slower burn for Indiana State, but I do think that they get it done and cover this number. Set them as a 7-point favorite. One to lay was the Sycamores, and set my total at a 147. So taking 147.5 or higher under, and I'm going to be willing to lay with Indiana State 605, 606 on the betting board. Maryland plays host to Rider. Rider is a underdog of 16 to 16.5 points, and total on this game between 129 and 130.5. It's actually opened up at 128.5 and set my total at 130. So here at the 129, still looking over. Rider has been miserable with their offense thus far this season. This bunch has scored 65 points or fewer in every one of their games against D1 competition. But if you look at the competition that they played, Marquette, Nebraska, Stony Brook, Duquesne, that's actually a very loaded roster. And I do think that Mervyn James is going to be able to find a little bit of room to operate here. 15.5 points, 7.5 boards, shooting 37.5% from three. And for Rider, they're not a great three-point shooting team. They weren't last year. They're better than shooting 25% from three-point range. TJ Weeks is a guy that's been around the block over at UMass the last few seasons. He's a career 36% three-point shooter that's currently shooting 28% from three. We should see that rise up a little bit. I do think that Tariq Ingram is going to be able to do a relatively solid job down low against a Maryland front court that does have Julian Reese being able to supply right around 9.5 rebounds per game. And I think Maryland's doing for a little bit of positivity with their three-point shooting as well. Once again, is Maryland a great three-point shooting team? No. Are they a better team than shooting 21.5% from three like they are right now? Absolutely. Also got Dante Scott, who's able to chip in there 11 points. And he's like the only guy on the roster for Maryland right now shooting above 30% from three-point range. It's been very ridiculous. I do think that guys like Jordan Geronimo and company are going to be able to get going. Question is, what are you going to be able to get moving forward out of the freshman into Deshaun Harris-Smith, who's been a little bit disappointing recently? He's had 8 points or fewer in 3 out of the team's last 5 games and 2 points or fewer in 2 out of the last 3. That's just not acceptable. I do think that Maryland's going to be able to rise up with their scoring. Jameer Young, he goes into takeover mode, multiple steals, 4 assists, 15 points per game. And I do think that both teams warm up a little bit with their three-point shooting to be able to push this total over. And with Rider having the versatility of someone like Mervyn James, and Maryland currently not getting what they were expecting out of their freshmen, I do like Rider to be able to hold in this game. Set my line at 14, so going to be willing to take the 16 points here with Rider, and with this total, going to be taking a look at the 129 over. 607, 608 on the betting board. Georgia Tech is going to be playing us Mississippi State. Mississippi State is between a 9 to a 10-point favorite, and your total on this game is 140.5, and I did set Georgia Tech as an underdog of 7.5 points, so I'm going to be willing to take 9+ with Georgia Tech. This is part of that new ACC-SEC challenge, by the way, and for Mississippi State. The defense is once again remarkable. Last year, they were a top 10 team in terms of points allowed on a per-possession basis, and they're picking up right where they left off a season ago, ranking number 6 in this category. And for Georgia Tech, they're coming off of, I believe that in that second half against Cincinnati, they were on the wrong end of like a 39-6 run or something like that. And I do think that there's a little bit of positivity coming in for this team. I do think that Damon Sotomayor is a relatively solid coach with some nice weapons on this team. Miles Kelly, the top scorer from a season ago, is back. He's able to log about 19 points per contest. It's a Georgia Tech team that needs to improve their 30% three-point shooting, and down low is going to be a little bit tough for them. They've got Deshaun Claude, who's able to give you 7 rebounds per game, so I do think that there's a little bit of upside with him. And now you've got Bay Nodongo, hopefully I said that correctly, gentleman from the Senegal who missed the first few games of the season. He's back at the fold as well. In his season debut against Cincinnati, he was able to log 8 points, 8 rebounds. That'll be big because his team was dealing with a little bit of a lack of depth to begin the season because Ebenezer Dwana, the transfer from NC State, just really hasn't materialized. And for Mississippi State, last year the biggest woe for this team was just overall shooting. They were 363rd out of 363 D1 teams in terms of three-point shooting percentage, and they are still going to be without Tolu Smith, but the three-point shooting has gone up for them. The biggest reason why, their top scorer, Josh Hubbard, he's been a stud freshman, shooting 41% from 3 with 16 points per game. He has been a big addition for this team. Now, you still have some shakiness with the likes of Shaquille Moore and company, but you know that this team is going to rebound. Jimmy Bell Jr. Jr. has come in from West Virginia, and he's really been able to be that guy that Tolu Smith was with about 9.5 rebounds per game. He's not quite Tolu Smith, but that really has helped mitigate the loss. You've got DJ Jeffries, who's become a designated rebounder with about 6.5 rebounds per game. Trey Fort, the stud junior college transfer, is able to shoot in the mid-30s from three. Good versatility with about 8 points, 4 boards for Mississippi State. They do a nice job of being able to generate steals as well, so I do think that this is going to be a little bit of a tougher, a little bit more grimy game, but I do think that Georgia Tech is going to be able to hold up a little bit defensively in this game, which is why I did set my total at 133.5. Mississippi State certainly not pushing tempo. For Mississippi State, they have been able to get to 70 plus in 4 of their last 5 games, but keep in mind the competition playing against Washington State, North Alabama, UT Martin, Northwestern, Nichols, so not necessarily the world's greatest competition, and they themselves on defense have just pounded teams into oblivion. They have yet to give up north of 64, but I do think that Georgia Tech going to be able to up their defense as well, guard the perimeter, and make Mississippi State be a little bit one-dimensional on offense. So I'm going to be willing to take 8 or more with Georgia Tech, and with this total set mine at a 133.5, I'm diving under 609, 610 on the betting board. It is Notre Dame on the road facing off against South Carolina. South Carolina, a favorite of 9 to 9.5 points, and your total is between 132.5 and 134. Set my number at 6. I'm going to be willing to take the points with Notre Dame. Notre Dame, very much a work in progress right now, but I do think that there are some pieces that will provide some fits for what has been a very surprising South Carolina team. I did not think that they would be 5-0 at this point, but love what I've seen out of the stud freshman of Marcus Burton. 18 points, 3 assists, 4 boards. Now, for Notre Dame, they're going to need to up their three-point shooting, as Burton is shooting less than 15% from three-point range. And as a whole, they're shooting 28% from three-point range. A Micah Shrewsbury coach team is not going to have success if they're shooting about 28% from three-point range. But you've got a team that does a very good job of being a rebound by committee. Each of their top 5 scorers are logging at least 4 rebounds per game. So that has been relatively impressive. You've got Julian Roper to be able to do a little bit of everything: a steal, 8 points, 5 boards, shooting in the mid-30s from three-point range. And then you've got Mr. Booth in Kerry Booth, who's been able to be as a 6'10" combo player, able to shoot about 40% from three-point range, going up against the South Carolina team that's gotten great production out of BJ Mack thus far. 16 points, 5 boards, comes in from Wofford. He's able to shoot 39% from 3 thus far this season. Do you think that might taper off a little bit? He's a career 36% three-point shooter. He was able to be relatively solid at Wofford, but I do think that we are going to be seeing the South Carolina team have a little bit of regression with regards to their offense. They're not quite a 39% three-point shooting team. Miles Sute is right now shooting 50% from three-point range. You're getting 57% three-point shooting out of Jacoby Wright, and I do think that some of these guys were maybe passed up a little bit too much in the transfer process. Taylon Cooper was a solid point guard when he was over at Morehead State in Minnesota. He's giving up 5.4 assists and 0.8 turnovers per game. He's not quite a 43% three-point shooter. No, so I do think that some of these guys are going to come back to earth, and though Mack has a little bit of versatility, you don't have a ton of size down low. You've got the Illinois transfer and Benjamin Bozeman's for Donk, who's able to give you about 4.5 rebounds per game. He provides good 6'9" size, but I do think that Notre Dame is actually going to be able to match up quite well on the glass. I do think that Notre Dame is going to do a solid job of guarding the perimeter against a South Carolina team that they're not really looking to push tempo. South Carolina has given up 68 points or fewer in 4 out of their 5 games this season. Notre Dame, they're playing a slow grinder style as well that has led to them scoring 70 points or fewer in all but 1 of their games thus far this season. So I did set my total at a 134. At a 132.5, 133, I do think that perhaps we've went a little bit too far down, because I do think that Notre Dame is going to see a little bit of a rise with their three-point shooting, and this is a Notre Dame defense that's still a little bit of a work in progress, and I do think we could get a little bit of late game fouling. So 133.5 or less, looking at the over. And with South Carolina, go ahead and make them a 6-point favorite, so taking the points and taking a look at the over. Now we have my DK Network right, a pick of 6-11, 6-12 on the betting board. LSU is on the road facing off against Syracuse. This is a pick'em game with the total between 150.5 and 151, and my write-up is on Syracuse. I did set the Qs as a 5.5-point favorite. I still have massive question marks with LSU in the backcourt, because we have yet to see Jalen Cook this season. He was denied a waiver as a 2-time transfer, a guy that I was thinking he was going to be the main trigger man for this team. Coming over from Tulane, he was averaging 20 points, 5 assists, 1.8 steals per game, and even if he gets his waiver approved before the game, you have to wonder how much camaraderie and chemistry he's going to have with his teammates. And it is an LSU team that's been able to do a relatively solid job on the glass, and that has been a little bit of an Achilles heel for Syracuse. But Syracuse is right now turning the ball over about 2.5 times less per game than LSU because of the point guard issues. And with LSU, you don't have a single guy guy that's giving you north of 2 assists per contest. Meanwhile, for Syracuse, I do think that they're going to be able to improve down low. Big reason why they've got such a bad rebound rate right now is because of the teams that they have played against. They had to play against in the Maui Invitational Gonzaga and Tennessee, and typically you throw out games against non-D1 competition like they played against Chaminade. So even though they put up 100 points in that game, those are numbers that don't qualify. So you got to be taking a look at that aspect of things as well. And then for Syracuse, do like what they're able to get. Judah Mintz, their main scorer, 4 assists, 2 steals, 18 points per game, shooting about 37% from 3. J.J. Starlin, very much a work in progress in terms of his shooting. Now, he's going to shoot better than 6.3% from 3-point range. At least you would hope he shoots better than 6.3% from 3-point range, because I can shoot better than 6.3% from 3-point range. But that said, he's been able to impact the game in so many different ways. Give it out 4 assists, nearly 6 rebounds, 12.5 points per contest. So, like what he's able to bring to the table. He doesn't have great conditioning, but he McLeod, he's someone that is 7'4". He should be able to hold up down low as well against an LSU team that does have a versatile big man in Will Baker, give you 16.5 points, 6.5 boards at 7 feet tall. He's able to pop threes, but sometimes plays, shall we say, shotty defense. And then when it comes to just the rest of the guys on this team, you've been able to get the Vanderbilt transfer and Jordan Wright to be able to give you 11.5 points per game, but he's had to become one of the main facilitators for the team. LSU is currently generating about 10 steals per contest, so even though they've turned the ball over quite a bit, they've been able to take it away, but much of this has come against lesser competition. When they've had their step-up games, they've had a little bit of an issue there, and I do think that Syracuse, with their backcourt, going to be able to get the job done against an LSU team that they have been very bad with their three-point shooting defense, ranking about 260th in the country. That should allow a Syracuse team that's currently shooting about 29% from distance to be able to get going. My DK Network right to pick Syracuse as a pick'em at home. I'm willing to lay up to 5 points with them, and with this total, it's set it at a 147.5. LSU's numbers are a little bit warped in terms of total possessions per game because they did have that overtime game against Wake Forest, and we have seen this LSU team held down a few times by the likes of Dayton, Nichols, and I do think that the Syracuse man-to-man defense is actually starting to work out. We saw some good signs in Maui. So going to be taking a look at this total under and my DK Network right to pick. That is on Syracuse. 6-13, 6-14 on the betting board. It is Western Carolina, and they are going to be on the road facing off against Tennessee Tech. Tennessee Tech finds themselves as underdogs of 7 points, and total is 141.5 to 142.5. And Tennessee Tech, I'd only set them as 2.5 point underdogs. I'm going to be willing to take the points. Tennessee Tech, they did have a lot of moving pieces in the offseason, especially in the backcourt, but I do think that they're finding their footing against a Western Carolina team that, no question about it, they're going to have the best player out there on the floor. That'd be Vontravious Woolbright. Woolbright has been an absolute stat sheet sufferer for this team. At 6'5", 6'6", he's able to do a nice job with 19 points, 10.5 rebounds, 5.5 assists, but he does also turn the ball over right around 3.5 times per contest. And he faces a team in Tennessee Tech that does have some good versatility of their own. Javis Harvey, he's returned to the fold after he was missing for a few games to begin the season, which warped their numbers a little bit. He's been tremendous since he has come back, being able to log about 13.5 points per contest. Last year shot 44% from 3. This year shooting about 15% from the outside. That should be rising up as the season goes along, as Tennessee Tech as a whole. Shooting 64% the free throw line, 29% from 3. They're not quite the same 3-point shooting team that they were a season ago, back when they did have the likes of Brett Thompson, Jalen Sabria and company in the fold, but I do think a guy that can really transform this offense is Rodney Johnson Jr., who comes over from the junior college level. He's been shooting 46% from 3-point range with 14 points, 5.5 boards, so I do think that Tennessee Tech is equipped to be able to match up with Vontravious Woolbright, and then the question becomes, can you get, if you're Western Carolina, the same amount of production out of Trey Jackson that you got a season ago? Last year, he was able to log 16 points, 4 boards on 42.5% 3-point shooting. That has tapered off a little bit now. He is coming off of scoring a combined 33 points in the previous 2 games, but he's been a little bit inconsistent, logging about 10.5 points per game thus far this season. It is a Western Carolina team that, outside of Woolbright, has done a nice job taking care of the ball, about 9.5 turnovers per contest, but outside of Woolbright, you really only have one other guy that's able to give you north of 5 boards per contest, and DJ Campbell, who stands just 6'2", and for Tennessee Tech, Josiah Davis, he's been a nice stat sheet sufferer for this team as well. 10 points, 6 boards, pair of assists per contest. You've got two very versatile teams, and you do have a Tennessee Tech team that feels like they're finding a little bit more down low. Daniel Agabunwe, hopefully I said that correctly, comes over from Little Rock, but he's done a solid job being able to give you a block and a half, 5 rebounds per game, a little bit more of a rim protector that is not going to do a ton on the offensive side of things, but is coming off of a 6-block performance about a week and a half ago against Midway College, and I do think that with Tennessee Tech, they're going to look to the inside to be able to hold in this game. Western Carolina is 5-0. Did knock off Notre Dame and Middle Tennessee on the road in nip and tuck games, but also got a Tennessee Tech team coming off of a nice road win against Presbyterian. They held in there close against Chattanooga, and I do think that for Tennessee Tech, being able to hold up inside is going to allow them to hold in this game. So, going to be willing to take the points with Tennessee Tech. Did set my total at a 140.5 as well. Western Carolina certainly playing much more slowly this year than they have in past years, and we've also got a Tennessee Tech team that I do think that they're going to be looking to slow things down a little bit as well. So diving in on the under, and I'm going to be willing to take the points with Tennessee Tech. 6:15, 6:16 on the betting board. It is Little Rock, and they play host to Ball State. Ball State finds themselves as an underdog of 2.5 to 3 points, and your total on this game is anywhere between 155.5 and 156. And with Little Rock, set them as a 2-point favorite. So here at 3, I'm going to be willing to take the points with Ball State. Little Rock has more talent on the roster. You bring in someone like Kalen Robinson, former top 150 recruit, and he has really impacted all sorts of things on the floor. 5.5 assists, 5.5 rebounds, 19 points per game, but you do have a Little Rock team that the one thing that they're really lacking is 3-point shooting. They need a little bit more out of Jordan Jefferson, who in the previous 2 seasons for this Little Rock team, one of the main holdovers from the last 2 years, has been able to shoot about 40% from 3-point range, but he's in a little bit of a diminished role because of some of the transfers that they did bring in. You bring in someone like a Jameer Chaplin, who, while he's over at South Florida, was a relatively solid contributor, and he's putting in there 16 points per game, but the problem is he's never been a good 3-point shooter for his career, less than 25% from distance. And for Ball State, I do think that they're going to be able to get a little bit more moving forward out of Jalen Anderson. He comes in from Loyola Marymount. He last season in the WCC had about 10 points, shot in the mid-30s from 3-point range. He's able to dole out a few assists per contest. That's going to be big because you've really been having the 6'9" combo player Bashir Jihad have to do it all. He's able to pop threes at about a 30 or so percent clip, 16 points, 6.5 boards. Been able to do an okay job there. And for this Ball State team overall, they are shooting 37.5% from the outside. Mikey Pearson, Davon Bailey, they've got a little bit of versatility. Both of these guys are shooting north of 45% from 3. Should see a little bit of a fall off there. And for Little Rock, I do think that they do a little bit of a better job down low, but without having their main guy via the transfer portal in Mikel Mitchell in the fold, as he came in from Arkansas, part of the Mitchell brothers who were over at Rhode Island to begin their career, it does leave this team a little bit suspect down low, and I do think that that is going to allow Ball State to be able to hold in there, and this is a Ball State team that's really heated up with their offense. Meanwhile, you've got a Little Rock team that has been getting absolutely torched on defense. For Little Rock, they have given up at least 80 points at each of their last 5 games, so it's an interesting something's got to give scenario as Ball State has been slowing down a little bit with their offense, and they've been actually halfway decent on defense, giving up 74 or fewer in each of their last 5 games. So that's at my total 152. I'm going to be diving in on the under, and with Ball State, I'm going to be willing to take the points, set them as a 2-point underdog. 6:17, 6:18 on the betting board. It is Missouri on the road facing off against Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh is a favorite of between 6.5 and 7 points. 147 to 147.5 is your total. Set this line at 6. So being able to get 7, I will be willing to take the points with Missouri. Missouri, less than terrific their last few games as a giant favorite. Unable to cover against Loyola of Maryland, South Carolina State, and then losing outright to Jackson State. Not necessarily savory. And if you look at the raw numbers for Pittsburgh, they are 5-1, but they played really one real form of competition in Florida, and they got pounded in that game. I love what you've been able to get in the triple-double machine in Carlton Carrington. As a matter of fact, he had a triple-double in the first game of his career. He's been able to log 15 points, 5.5 boards, 6.5 assists. He has legitimately been one of the best freshmen in all of college basketball. And you've got balanced rebounding when it comes to Pittsburgh as well. Each of their top 6 players are logging at least 4.7 rebounds per game. The Diaz-Graham brothers are able to pop some threes as well, but again, the competition that they played has not necessarily been too terrific. Now, in the case of Missouri, it's not like they played amazing competition either. And for Missouri, they become a little bit more of a mid-tempo team this season. Last year, they were running it and gunning it. Now they've cut down on the turnovers. They're still generating about 9 steals per game. And I think a key for them moving forward getting a little bit more out of Connor Vanover. He has really not been out there on the floor too much. He has played more than 8 minutes and just won the team's games thus far this season. 7'5" giant of the earth that comes over from Oral Roberts. I think that he can be a big key for this team. And then you've really got your big three: Sean East, Noah Carter, Nick Honor. These guys have been able to combine for about 41 points between the three of them. They have been able to dish out about 8 assists per contest. And with East and Honor, they're both shooting 50+% from three-point range. I think that that's going to fall off a little bit, but this is a Missouri team that they are going to be willing to go with a little bit of a deeper rotation. They've been about 7.5 deep. I do expect a little bit more of John Tone Jay moving forward. It has been a little bit befuddling that someone like a Kurt Lewis, the tremendous junior college transfer, has only been seeing right around about 8 or so minutes per contest, but there is a lot of different moving parts for this Missouri team. They do have to match up with Blake Hinson, who's been able to give you 19 points, and at 6'7" last year was shooting darn near 40% from three-point range. But I do think that for Missouri, they're going to be able to force some turnovers against a Pittsburgh team that has not really been battle-tested. I do think that Pittsburgh is going to get back to their roots just a little bit more and try to crank this thing up-tempo a little bit more. On the Pittsburgh defense we saw a season ago, less than terrific when they played against better competition. So it is a spot where I did set my total at 152. I'm going to be looking at the over and getting north of 6, taking the points with Missouri. 619, 620 on the betting board. It is Kentucky playing against Miami. Kentucky's a 5.5 to a 6-point favorite with your total between 163.5 and 164.5. Now, Kentucky has really cranked up their tempo. This is a team that in past years, you would typically expect them to be somewhere in the middle of college basketball in terms of total possessions per game. Right now, Kentucky is a top 50 team in terms of total possessions per game, while Miami is clocking in at 44th. But if you take a look at Kentucky, they have been playing some more up-tempo teams to begin the season, playing against Marshall, playing against St. Joe's. That has had a little bit of a hand to do with it. So it is a spot where I do think that this total is maybe set a little bit too high. I'm going to be taking a look at the under end with Kentucky as well. The overtime game that they did play against St. Joe's, that does warp their numbers just a little bit in terms of the amount of points that they are allowing. Certainly both of these teams are able to light it up, as you've got a Kentucky team that overall for the season they're shooting 42.5% from three-point range. I fully expect there to be a drop-off there, and this is with DJ Wagner shooting about 27% from the outside, as Wagner has impacted the game outside of just raw scoring. He is giving you 14.5 points per game, but 3.7 assists and 1.5 turnovers per game. And for Kentucky, they have been highly efficient with just 8.2 turnovers per game, but Miami is another one of those highly efficient teams as well. Nigel Pack has been having the ball in his hands quite a bit more. He and Bentley Joseph have been working in tandem with about 8 assists per contest. Joseph is shooting 55% from three. Miami, 45.8% from three-point range. Again, this is a very efficient team. This is a very good shooting team. 45.8% from three-point range would be setting all sorts of college basketball records. We are going to see a fall off there. Luka Poplar is shooting 59.5% from three-point range. Last year shot 37.5%, and I think he could shoot well above 40% from three-point range, but we should see that drop off a little bit. But I think is going to be big for Miami is the man down low. That'd be Nochad Omier. 16 points, 9 boards, 2.5 steals per contest, and that is part of it as well. Miami has been a team over the last few seasons under Jim Larrañaga who's been able to do a solid job being able to rip the ball away with having young guards out there like a Rob Dillingham who's been tremendous to this point. I do think that is going to get to Kentucky a little bit now. It is hard to go into Rupp Arena and win, and I don't think that Miami is going to be able to pull off the outright win. You're going to be playing a little bit of 7-on-5 when it comes to back half of some of these games as well, but I do think that with Miami, they're going to be able to hold in there. I do think that we're going to see a bit of a drop-off in terms of the scoring with both of these teams as well. They have been just so hot from the outside, so I do expect there to be a little bit of fall off, which is why I did set my total at 157.5. I think you get scoring. I just don't think that we get a first to 80 sort of game, so going to be taking a look at this total under, and with regards to Miami, something that's a 3.5 point underdog, so I'm going to be willing to take a look at the points to go along with the under. 621, 622 on the betting board. Utah State is on the road facing off against St. Louis. St. Louis is a 5 to 5.5 point underdog with your total between 146.5 and 147, and I made St. Louis a 2-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to ride with them outright on the money line. A little bit befuddling that they made Utah State a 5 to 5.5 point road favorite. This actually opened up at 6, and I like this Utah State team. You've had Great Osabor come in, and he's been able to give the team a double-double thus far this season, but this feels overreactionary. This is pretty much what you saw from Montana State a season ago, who was a solid 14 seed. Darius Brown does a nice job being able to dole out the ball. 7.8 assists, 1.2 steals per game, shooting 40% from three-point range. highly efficient player in general, but this Utah State team does have their liabilities on defense. Other than Osabor, you don't have a single guy that is giving you north of 4.8 rebounds per game. And for St. Louis, I think that Terrence Hargrove Jr. is going to be a hard guard. He's a 6'5", do-it-all sort of bowling ball style player that his career about 34% three-point shooter, logging 15 points, 6 boards per game. Fully recognize that, for one, Yuri Collins is not going to be walking through that door, and the injury that they sustained to Sincere Parker, that is something that is accounted for, but still have one of the better knockdown shooters in mid-major college basketball, and Gibson Jimerson. Jimerson has shot at least 39.5% from three-point range in every year that he's been on campus in college basketball. Tim Dalger should help this team hold up down low as well. He comes in from Tulsa with around 5.5 rebounds per game, and we've got a wily point guard in Michael Meadows, who he began his career at Eastern Washington. Last 2 years at Portland State was a solid guy, being able to give you about 10 points per game. He's a career 35% three-point shooter that can give you about 3 assists per game without turning the ball over a lot. He's got a career 1.1 turnovers per game, so he does a nice job of being able to take care of the ball, not turning it over too much. This injury to Sincere Parker, no doubt about it, it's rough, but I do expect a little bit more out of Larry Hughes II. Yes, of relation to that, Larry Hughes, after he shot about 41% from three-point range and showed some moments of brilliance as well for Utah State, I do think that this is a pretty solid team that is doing a good job of locking you up on defense. In regulation, they have given up fewer than 70 points in pretty much all but one of their games thus far this season. Meanwhile, you've got a St. Louis team that, ever since the injury, they have been playing a little bit more slowly as well. Since Parker went down, they have failed to break the 70-point plateau, but I do think that this is going to be a game where St. Louis is going to be able to do a solid job of being able to dial things back, have Mike Meadows be efficient, and get the job done at home. Set my total at a 146, so here at the 147, diving in on the under end, I'm going to be willing to take St. Louis outright on the money line as a home underdog. 623, 624 on the betting board. Oral Roberts is on the road facing off against Kansas State. K-State is a favorite of 15 points, and your totals between 153.5 and 154.5. Set my line at 15.5. I don't want to lay anything more than 15, but I'm going to be willing to lay 15. We've got a lot of talent in general with this Kansas State bunch, as they've been able to have Mr. Tyler Perry go from lighting it up on the silver screen to lighting it up on the hardwood. Comes in from North Texas, where he was logging 17 points per game for the slowest team in terms of possessions per game in all of college basketball. And he's been able to have those numbers translate up to the Big 12. He's already logging about 17 points per game now with this Kansas State team. You were expecting them to have a bit more down low in Nequan Tomlin, but Arthur Kaluma has done a nice job being able to grab some boards. He's got a little bit of versatility. Has never been a great three-point shooter, but he chips in there a pair of assists to go along to 8.5 boards, nearly 15 points per game, and that's going to be hard for Oral Roberts to overcome, as right now they're shooting about 32% from three-point range. This is a lot of the supporting cast that you saw from a season ago, but you lose Max A-Smith, you lose the big guys from that run that they made to the Sweet 16 a pair of years ago. You do have someone in Kareem Thompson who is a little bit of a stat sheet stuffer, just a glue guy that's going to chip in there about 10 points, 5 boards, 3 assists, shoots in the mid-30s from three-point range. As a matter of fact, last year shot about 39% from three-point range, but where in the heck is Trey Phipps? Trey Phipps a season ago was only logging about 4 points per game when this team was able to ascend during the 2021-22 campaign. He was averaging 8.5 points, shooting 40% from three-point range, began his career at Oklahoma, and now he's averaging about 2.5 points per game and can't get out there on the floor. It's been a big giant fall off from Isaac McBride. He's had to do it all with 21.5 points per game, and despite the fact that Tomlin is not out there for Kansas State still has very clearly a size advantage, especially David Ngesson being able to give you about 8.5 points, 8.5 boards. You saw Will McNair Jr. is able to pull in there some boards. It is a Kansas State team that needs to cut down on the 15 turnovers per game, but this is not an Oral Roberts team that's going to be forcing the issue, generating a lot of steals. And for Oral Roberts, uncharacteristically, against D1 competition, they have not broken the 71-point plateau. Meanwhile, you've got a Kansas State team that they have gotten to at least 83 points in 4 of their last 5 games. They're certainly looking to push tempo, so it's a good old situation of something's got to give. I did set my total at a 153.5 here, between 153 and 154. This opened up at 152. I actually like the opener over out of all these numbers, but I would rather take a 153 over. I did think that Oral Roberts going to try to get back to the roots, try to play this a little bit more up-tempo, so I'm going to be taking a look at that over, and with Kansas State, did set them as a favorite of 15.5 points, so going to be willing to lay 15 and not a half a point more. 625, 626 on the betting board. It is Kansas in the playoffs at Eastern Illinois. Eastern Illinois is an underdog between 35 to 35.5 points, and your total on this game in between 138.5 and 140. I did set my total at a 145.5. I'm going to be taking a look at the over. with Eastern Illinois, I just think that they're getting fed to the wolves in this scenario, with Eastern Illinois 252nd in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and Kansas did show some warts in the Maui Invitational. They should be just fine in this one, going up against a team that is frankly completely and utterly outgunned. You've got an Eastern Illinois team that they lose a lot of their top scorers from a season ago. Keon Hodges was a very nice contributor when they were able to pull off that 30-point underdog win against Iowa. Now you're looking to guys that have been just unable to get out there on the floor the last few seasons, like a Jermaine Hamlin, who did begin his career at Illinois, but I mean, even last year for Eastern Illinois, he was unable to contribute a lot. You've had Cooper Jacoby come in from Toledo, and he's been a solid player for the team. About 7.5 boards, 11 points per game. He had 6'7" his matchup with 7-foot Hunter Dickinson, and that's going to be rough. Dickinson is right now towards the top of all of college basketball in terms of rebounds per game, 21.5 points, 12.5 boards, while shooting 66.7% from three. Now, that's going to see a little bit of a fall off, but Kevin McCullough is just all out there on the floor doing so many different things. Nearly 6 assists, 18 points, 8 boards. He just finds a way to impact the game. Kansas does need to cut down on the 14 turnovers per game, but you've got a good point guard in DeJuan Harris, who is giving you 7 assists per game. The guy that I think he needs to step up a little bit more is Marco Jackson. Recognize that he's not the greatest shooter in the world, but he's only giving you about 6 points per contest. You need him to shoot a little bit better than 20% from three-point range, but for Eastern Illinois, unless if Dan Lewis can really get things going, as he shot about 52% from three-point range a few seasons ago. This far this season, he's been able to shoot about 35% from three, but he's only giving you 7 points. You need a little bit more there. Jalen Gibson is right now your main facilitator with right around 2 assists per contest. He was over at Mount St. Mary's the last 2 seasons, where he was a little bit of an afterthought there with about 3.5 points per game for Eastern Illinois. They're doing an okay job taking care of the ball with about 10.5 turnovers per game, but they're getting pounded on the glass. They're not able to knock down their open shots, shooting about 40.5% from the floor, and I do think that Kansas, much like they did with Manhattan, much like they did with some of these other lesser teams that have come into the fog like NC Central, I think that they're going to mop the floor with them. I did set my line at a 35.5, and typically in blowouts, you see things become a little bit more open gym, happy action, fun time. So willing to lay 35 with Kansas. Not going to be willing to lay anything more than 35 with Kansas, but I'm willing to lay 35 with Kansas, and with this total, set it at a 145.5. So looking at the over, and I'm willing to lay with Kansas. 627, 628 on the betting board. Gonzaga is going to be playing us to Cal State Bakersfield. Meet for the Roadrunners, who find themselves as 27.5 to 28-point underdogs. 138 to 139.5 is your total, and I did set Gonzaga as a favorite of 26 points. I think that this is a little bit too lofty. I'm going to be willing to take the points with the old Meet Me Roadrunners, and with Cal State Bakersfield, you've got a bunch that's really been able to do a nice job of featuring Caleb Higgins. Higgins, last season, he was averaging about 13 points, throwing out 4 assists per game through 13 games, and then went down with the season-ending injury. He has returned, and he's returned in full force with about 16 points, 3 assists thus far this season, so picking up right where he left off. The big key is who is going to be able to help out Higgins in the backcourt, because you really don't have anyone that's giving you north of 8 points per contest outside of him. If all you got one player on the roster that's able to give you north of 4 rebounds per game, that would be Modestus Concaleres, a former top 150 recruit of Creighton. And I do think that we should see some positivity with this Bakersfield team. Currently, they're shooting about 24% from three-point range, and they go up against a Gonzaga team that is far better on defense this year than a season ago. Last season, Gonzaga was giving up about 8 more points per 100 possessions than they are thus far this season, with Graham Ike being able to help out on the defensive side of things. And on top of that, in the Maui Invitational, you notice that he was popping some jumpers. He's currently shooting 44% from 3 with his 14 points and 8 boards, so that is something that you like to see. And Anton Watson, he's not flashy, but he just impacts the game in so many different ways with about 2.5 assists. He's able to give you 16 points. He's not a great three-point shooter. He's right now shooting 50% from 3. That is going to be falling off. But another guy that's really impressed me, Braden Huff, the true freshman that comes in from the great state of Illinois. Now, you did see a little bit of a shortage of minutes in the games in Maui, but I mean, even in that game against Syracuse, he had 9 points in 12 minutes. This guy finds a way to be able to impact the game, even though he hasn't necessarily been getting a boatload of minutes. Ryan Nembhard has been able to do a solid job with 5 assists as well, but he has been turning the ball over more than he did at Creighton a season ago when he was a freshman at Creighton. You could tell that he did have a turnover woes, so it does feel like there's a few growing pains in the backcourt for a Gonzaga team that is looking to life without Drew Timme. With Bakersfield, they're going to get plowed on the glass, but I do like the fact that they do have some veteran guards to be able to hold down the fort, and this is a Bakersfield team that they have been a little bit more suspect with their defense thus far this season, and you do have a Gonzaga team that that is actually really slowing things down as well. Gonzaga, typically a top 10 team in terms of total possessions per game, but the teams that they played with the likes of Purdue, with having to play against even a team like UCLA towards the back half of the Maui Invitational, I think has had a big hand to play. That's why they have been so slow in Bakersfield. They're in 13th in the country thus far in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. So I did set my total at 146. I do think that we're going to see a little bit more of the Gonzaga team that we all know and love in terms of their offense. So going to be taking a look at the over with Gonzaga. Going to set them as a 26-point favorite. So I'm going to be willing to take the points and the over. 629, 630 on the betting board. Ole Miss is going to be playing us at NC State. NC State finds themselves as a underdog of 1 to 1.5 points, and your totals between 146 and 146.5. I did set NC State as an underdog of 1.5 points at 1, and I'm seeing a pick'em line out there as well. I'm going to be rolling to ride with Ole Miss. It actually opened up with NC State being the very small 1-point favorite, so on a rather pick'em game, I do lean to the home team of Ole Miss. Now, Ole Miss still missing some of those two-time transfers that they were hoping to be able to get out there on the floor. They have been without Musa Cisse all season long, so that has impacted this team. And then when it comes to the backcourt, they have been without Brandon Murray. But Jalen Murray, the transfer from St. Peter's, I really didn't have high expectations from. He has exceeded those. He was a part-time starter for St. Peter's the season ago, and he's been able to give the team 12.5 points, shooting 37% from 3. That has been a nice surprise, and they go up against an NC State team that has been a top 30 team in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, and they've been so efficient with the ball. They're shooting about 35% from 3, which is solid, but only about 9 turnovers per game. Biggest reason why is Michael O'Connell has done a good job of being a pass-first point guard. He's only giving you about 7 points per game, but chips in there 4 assists, 3 rebounds, all while turning the ball over only about 1 time per game, and have to like what you've been able to get down low out of the duo of Mohamed Diarra along with DJ Burns. These two guys been able to give you about 12 boards per contest, but I do think that Ole Miss, despite the fact that they'd be much better with Cisse out there and they are dealing with a little bit of lack of size, they should be able to hold in there, because I do think that Jamarian Sharp is going to have his coming-of-age moment. Literally the tallest player in all of college basketball at 7'5". He's been able to give you about 2.5 blocks per game this season. When he was over at Western Kentucky a season ago, he was able to give you about 4 blocks per game. And then you've got a lot of pieces in a backcourt for Ole Miss that is shooting about 34% from 3, and they've also been good at taking care of the ball. They're only turning it over about 10 times per contest. Murray, along with Matthew Morrell, are both giving you about 3.8 assists per game. Matthew Morrell is able to give you 14.5 points per game, and it's only shooting 25% from 3. I think that we're going to see a little bit of a rise up there. And then the X factor for this team is TJ Caldwell. Caldwell a season ago only shot about 28% from 3. There were moments where he looked really good, and then he just fell off. He's really been able to take that freshman to sophomore leap with about 9.5 points per game, and NC State stepping in a hostile environment. I think that they're going to have a little bit of a tough time with this one against an Ole Miss team that has allowed north of 70 points in just one of their games as far this season. I do think that they slow down an NC State team that has been incredibly efficient with their offense. Did set my total at 145.5, so at the 146, looking at the under, and with Ole Miss, made them the slight favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay up to a point with them. 631, 632 on the betting board. Clemson is going to be on the road facing off against Alabama. Alabama's a 9.5 to a 10-point favorite, and your total is between 159 and 160.5. I did set Alabama's 12-point favorite, so I'm going to be willing to lay it. Alabama's been playing at warp speed. Top 10 team in the country in terms of total possessions per game. They're towards the top of all of college basketball in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. I think we're going to see it fall off with this 3-point shooting, though. They are currently shooting 43% from 3-point range, with out of their top 7 scorers, you've got 5 of them currently shooting north of 41.2% from 3, and 4 of them shooting at least 50% from 3-point range. That's just absolutely ridiculous. Now, I do like what you're able to get out of versatile guards Mark Sears, Aaron Estrada. They're combining for about 37 points, 9 boards, 7.5 assists, 3 steals. So, I mean, these guys have been remarkable, and despite the fact that Alabama's played fast, 12 turnovers per game for their tempo is actually really, really low, but I do think that they're going to have a little bit of a tough time patching up with P.J. Hall. Grant Nelson is a nice player at 6'10", 6'11". He does a solid job being able to impact the game with his versatility, his ability to be able to handle, but Hall's shooting in the high 30s from 3-point range, 7 boards, 21.5 points per game, and now you've got a nice backcourt duo in Joe Girard along with Chase Hunter. Hunter had to do it all by himself essentially last year with 14 points, 4.5 assists. Now the load has been taken off of him a little bit. You've got Ian Scheffelen, who's been able to do a solid job with about 7 rebounds per game. And for Clemson, they're shooting 39.5% per 3. I do think that they're going to experience a little bit of fall off as well, though. I do think that the overall just efficiency of Clemson going to continue. They've only been turning the ball over about 9.8 times per contest. That was more like 11 times per game last season with the drop-off in turnovers that we've seen in college basketball this season. I do think that that's going to withhold. And for Clemson, they've been pretty solid on defense as well, allowing fewer than 70 points at all but one of their games this far this season. Lone exception is when they played against a very up-tempo UAB team. And for Alabama, this team has been able to get to the 80-point plateau in every single game this far this season. So it is a good old situation of something's got to give. I do think that things are going to be dialed back just a little bit in this game. I don't think that we're going to see either of these teams playing some like sort of a rock fight or anything like that, but I do think that we are going to see things be a little bit more slowed down. I do think that Clemson is going to be able to do a little bit of a better job with their defense, but in the end, Alabama just has too many weapons for this Clemson team. Clemson, I feel like they rely a little bit too much on Hall down low, and with just the overall bodies and the overall versatility of Alabama, they're going to be able to open this game up. I did set Alabama as a 12-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number, and in terms of total, set mine at a 156, so I'm going to be taking a look at the under 633, 634 on the betting board. UNLV is going to be playing us Akron. Akron finds themselves as an underdog of 3 points, and your total is 141, and with Akron, I did set them as a underdog of 1.5 points, so willing to take 3. I don't want to take them outright on the money line. Being out here in lovely Las Vegas, I can tell you that sometimes we have some very funky things that happen when it comes to teams coming to the Thomas and Mack Center, but when it comes to this Akron bunch, I do think that they're going to be able to hold in there against UNLV with being able to control things down low with Enrique Freeman. 16.5 points, 11.5 boards, currently shooting 57% from three-point range as well. I don't think that we are going to be seeing that just continue on, but you do have a UNLV team that, in general, is going to be looking to Jalen Hill to continue to ascend. He, over at Oklahoma last year, was a starter that was able to log in the Big 12 about 10 points, 6 boards, and he's been all over the place this year, I think is the best way of putting it. He's currently shooting 40% from three-point range. We should see a little bit of a drop-off there, but I thought we would see a little bit more of a rise-up than we have, but you have a UNLV team that has some good versatility, but someone like a Luis Rodriguez who's able to chip in there 12 points, just under 6 boards, not going to shoot it well from three-point range, and overall, UNLV should shoot a little bit better from three-point range than their current 31%. You've got Justin Webster. He is right now averaging 8 points per game and shot 46% from three last year. Didn't think he would duplicate 46% three-point shooting, but it's better than the 23.3% he's shooting thus far this season. But with Akron in the backcourt, Caleb Thornton has been able to do a nice job of being efficient with just 1.7 turnovers per game. Not like he's averaging a ton of assists or anything like that, and Akron does need to cut down on the 13.5 turnovers per game, but part of the reason why Akron has turned it over so much is that they've had to play against the likes of Utah State, Drake, Southern Miss, teams that do a very solid job of being able to rip the ball away, and UNLV is another one of those teams that they do try to generate quite a few steals. That hasn't been the case as much this year. Last year, they were really having those active hands, and you can tell that they're looking a little bit more to the post. They bring in someone like a Caleb Boone, who began his career over at Oklahoma State, and he's actually a starter for the team last season, so it's going to be all about Akron trying to win from within, and I do think that Enrique Freeman is going to be able to do so. So this is a circumstance where I did set my line at a 1.5. I'm going to be willing to take 3 with Akron. I think that this turns into a little bit more of a slow grinder. You've got an Akron team that at their core, they're looking to play good, sound defense, and they're going up against a UNLV team that they're looking to push tempo a little bit more, but with their pieces, they're just not able to go as up-tempo as they have in, say, a year or two ago under the Kruger regime. So this is a spot where I'm going to be taking a look at the under and the 3 points with Akron. 635, 636 on the betting board. It is Washington playing us at UC San Diego. San Diego finds themselves as an underdog of 14.5 to 15.5 points. 149.5 to 151 is your total, and with this UC San Diego team, I did set them as a 14-point underdog, so I'm going to be willing to take those points. With Washington, it's just a case of inconsistency with them. We've noticed this out of Mike Hopkins' teams in general, and they're going to be going up against the UC San Diego bunch that does have a guy that's able to really take the top off of a defense, and that'd be Bryce Pope. Bryce Pope is an X-factor with 19.5 points, 4 boards, shooting 38.5% from three-point range, and for Washington, this team is incredibly inconsistent from the outside. They're currently shooting 30% from three-point range, with Keon Brooks actually being much better from the outside this year than in past years. He's been able to shoot about 35.3% from three, and you've gotten the same out of Corin Johnson as well. He's been able to log 10 points, but really doesn't do anything other than shoot threes for Brooks. He impacts the game in so many different ways. 7.5 boards, 23 points per game, and then Xavier Wheeler. The 5.8 assists per game is great. Gets reckless with the ball, though. 4.5 turnovers per game. We saw that when he was a main man over at Georgia a few seasons ago, and for UC San Diego, it's not great at generating steals, but they're not bad. 7 steals per contest, with Hayden Gray really leading the way. Comes in from the the non-Division I level, he's been able to log just under 12 points per contest, giving out 3.5 assists. He's been a nice glue guy to allow Bryce Pope to be able to play off the ball a little bit more. And then down low, Francis Nwoke, along with Wanya Tate-Jones. These two guys, they've been able to combine for about 10.5 rebounds per game. So I do think that UC San Diego going to be able to do an okay job on the glass, even though you do have for Washington quite a bit more size with having someone like a Braxton Mayo, a shot blocker, 7'1". He's a load to match up against. Franny Kepidog is able to give you about 5.5 rebounds per game, but I have noticed that Washington has been playing a lot more small ball, and I do think that that could be to the advantage of UC San Diego for them being able to hold in there. So I did set this line at a 14. I'm going to be willing to take the points, and with UC San Diego, they're playing a little bit more up-tempo this year than they have in past years. At Washington, they certainly have been cranking up their pace as well, but for Washington, a little bit of a reason why they have so many possessions per game is because they already did play at least one overtime game thus far this season. I do think that UC San Diego, a team that's a little bit more mid-tempo, is going to be able to keep this game a bit more calm down. So I'm going to be taking a look at the points, set my total at 148, and I'm going to be diving in on the under. 637, 638 on the betting board. Battle of Portland. Portland is on the road facing off against Portland State. Portland State, the Vikings, are a 3.5 to a 4.5 point favorite, and your total between 151.5 and 153. For Portland State, I did set them as a favorite of 2.5 points, so being able to get north of 3 in this rivalry matchup is something that appeals to me. I am going to be taking these points. When it comes to Portland, you've got good versatility out there on the backcourt, as you've had Tyler Robertson be Mr. Do-It-All at 6'6", 16.5 points, 5.5 assists. He has been in the Shante Ligon system for essentially 5 years now, so it's nice to be able to have pretty much a second coach out there on the floor now. Portland is going to need to cut down on these turnovers, 15 per contest, but they are now shooting about 35% for three-point range. Chris Austin, 2 seasons ago, was a starter for the team, missed all of last year. He's returned and has not looked quite like himself quite yet, only about 6.5 points per game, but he is starting to get a few more minutes. He's starting to reacclimate himself, and his upside, I think, is paramount for the team, because where Portland is going to be dominated is down low, other than what you've been able to get out of your main guy, who, I mean, it's absolutely amazing what Tyler Harris has been able to do as a 6'8" freshman. 17.5 points, 8.5 boards. This was clearly unexpected. He's shooting 62% from 3. Yep, there will be a little bit of regression there, but other than you've only got one guy that's able to give you north of 4.5 rebounds per game. That'd be Vasile Vunacic. Hopefully I said that correctly. He was a part-time starter for Portland a season ago that has really been able to ascend with 7.5 points, 5 rebounds per game. You've got Vusan Masic as well, who's been able to come in from Maine. He's been able to duplicate the 12.5 points per game they had over there a few seasons ago. Meanwhile, for Portland State, not a lot of size with this team either. Don't have a single guy that's able to give you north of 5.8 rebounds per game, though that main man, KJ Allen, comes in from Texas Tech. He's been able to impact the game in a wide variety of ways, and Portland State has always been relatively solid at being able to generate steals. They get about 8 per contest, so that does hurt this Portland team a little bit, but with this Portland State team, unlike last year where you had that main point guard and Cameron Parker that you knew that he would do a solid job running this offense, having all of these guards in tandem, you don't have that this year. Jarrell Satterfield has had to do it all. He's a solid three-point shooter at 37%, but it's giving you 10.5 points, 2.5 assists per game. It has led to the offense being a little bit more clunky. Portland State having to slow down their style a little bit more, and with Portland State not really having an advantage down low against Portland, I do think that that is going to allow the Pilots to be able to hold in this game. Both of these teams have been a little bit out of sorts, and for Portland, their numbers are very much warped by the fact that they have played some non-D1 opponents. You've seen Portland State have to play against D3 Linfield as well, so both of these teams have a little bit of funkiness there, but in an intra-city rivalry, I do think that Portland is going to be able to hold in there in a battle in which you know that both fan bases are going to be showing up and showing out for their team. I set this line at 2.5, going to be willing to take the points with Portland, set my total at 150.5, so diving under to go along with the Pilots. This is the last game on the normal Las Vegas betting board before we hit the extra games, 639, 640. It is Pepperdine, and the Waves are going to be playing against Idaho State. Idaho State finds themselves as an underdog of 7 to 7.5 points, and your total is 140.5 to 141.5, and with Idaho State, I did set them as an underdog of 10 points, so I am going to be willing to take the points. For Pepperdine, they are playing a bit more slowly than they did a season ago. Last year, Pepperdine was just absolutely gunning it, and they had one of the worst defenses in all of college basketball. Not to say that the Pepperdine defense is amazing this year, at 188th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per-possession basis, but that is marked improvement from what we saw a season ago, and they go up against an Idaho State team that is really not looking to push tempo right now. Out of 361 Division I teams, they are currently 358th. You have someone like a Miguel Tomley in the backcourt for Idaho State, who has been able to do a solid job. He's been able to chip in there about like 11 to 12 points per contest. He'll give you a few assists, but with this Pepperdine team, even without Javon Porter, which that is a big loss for this team. He was so versatile a season ago. I do still think that they're going to be able to do a solid job down low against the likes of Braden Parker and company. Parker's been able to give you about 6 to 7 rebounds per game, but just haven't necessarily loved his overall game with Pepperdine as well. You saw some very explosive scoring with Houston Malott being able to chip in there 19.5 points per game overall this season, shooting 47.5% from 3, and you're certainly going to see a drop-off from Michael Ajay, shooting 56.5% from 3-point range with his 18 points per game. But Ethan Anderson is someone that, as a freshman at USC, was seeing meaningful minutes in the backcourt. He's been able to give the team 3.5 assists per game. Doesn't need to cut down on those 3 turnovers per contest, but they go up against an Idaho State team that I do think that they are just a little bit inferior athleticism-wise. They have been able to generate some steals, about 9 per contest. A lot of that has come against lesser competition, though, and for this Idaho State team, they shoot in the mid-30s from 3-point range. You really don't have anyone that has been able to emerge for more than about 11.5 points per game. They don't have that go-to guy. Meanwhile, Pepperdine has a lot of guys that are able to knock down those shots late, and for Pepperdine, I do think that they're going to need to improve that defense a little bit more from what it was last 4 games, where they gave up 76 plus in every one of them. But even though Pepperdine is on that losing streak, losing to UC Irvine, Indiana State, New Mexico, UNLV, those are all good teams, and Idaho State just has not really seen that level of ability since that game against Iowa State where they got pounded by North of 30 points. So I do think that the schedule played is big in this one. I did set Pepperdine as a 10-point favorite, and I do think that Pepperdine going to be able to crank up the tempo, and I do think that for Idaho State, their defense is going to get a little bit more exposed like it did against better competition like it did in that game against Iowa State. So one to lay up to 9.5 with Pepperdine and taking a look at the over. Now we hit the extra games.
The normal betting board picks are complete, but there are some extra games today, so we go into the bonus.
306-501, 306-502. Howard is playing host to Cincinnati. Yes, we are on to Cincinnati, who's on to being a 10 to a 10.5 point road favorite, and your totals between 148.5 and 149.5. Semi-line at 11.5. I'm going to be willing to lay it with Cincinnati. I know that my good friend Evan Miyakawa was posting up the just player rankings in general from what we've seen early on in the season. And Victor Lakeen of Cincinnati is currently one of those top 30 guys, and he just has been so critical for the Cincinnati team because Jamiel Reynolds was denied a waiver to be able to play immediately. They're just now getting back Aziz Bandengo, who was really the WAC Defensive Player of the Year a season ago. But with Victor Lakeen being able to give you 7+ rebounds, being able to chip in there a double-figure amount of points, not going to go out there and shoot a lot of threes, but he's been a nice stabilizer for the team, and they go up against a Howard bunch that they're just not going to have a ton down low to be able to match up. Right now, their top rebounder is Bryce Harris, who's doing everything for the team. He's been able to log 17 points, 6.5 boards per game. Now, Seth Towns, it looks like he's starting to get back to that, I can't believe I'm saying it, 2017-2018 form that he showed when he was Player of the Year over there at Harvard. Injuries have just robbed him of about 500 years of college basketball, but coming off of a double-double, 26 points, 11 boards, they had in the last game against Mount St. Mary's. Guy still clearly has quite a bit of ability. He's able to pop it from 3-point range, but with this Howard bunch, they're also turning the ball over 17 times per game. They oftentimes get too fast for their own good. Meanwhile, Cincinnati, even though they do play a little bit faster under Wes Miller, they do a nice job being able to take care of the ball. And for this Howard team, defense is always an issue for them. 230th in all of college basketball in terms of points allowed on a per-possession basis. And even though Cincinnati is fast, they're efficient on the defensive end. 16th in the country with this regard, having Simeus Lucasius, a 6'8" combo player, to have 4.4 assists to under 1.5 turnovers per game. And as a matter of fact, though Cincinnati does play a little bit fast, it's not like they play at warp speed, but they play relatively fast. They have just 8.5 turnovers per game, shooting 37.5% from 3-point range. You've been able to get good production as well out of Dan Skillings Jr. has really stepped up in the year 1 to year 2 bump with about 13 points per game. I think that's going to be a little bit too much for Shai Odom and company, and I think Howard is going to have a tough time taking care of the ball. So did set Cincinnati as an 11.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay it. I did set my total at 153.5. I think we get plenty of possessions, and I do think that Cincinnati is really going to be able to put up a big number on Howard. So looking at the over, and I'm going to be willing to lay it with Cincinnati. 306-503, 306-504. Furman is going to be playing us to South Carolina State. South Carolina State, an underdog of 19.5 to 20 points, and your totals between 167 to 167.5. Set my total at a 165. I think that this should be a high total. I just don't know if South Carolina State is going to be able to do just enough to be able to help out with this total over, and I did set Furman as a 21-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay it. Now for Furman, the defense has not been great. That is needless to say, as currently in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, they are 301st. I do think that this is going to improve a little bit in the multi-team event that they had out in South Carolina a week ago. They certainly did have to play against some good competition, and now they go up against the South Carolina State team that they lose most of their main scoring from the season ago. Now, South Carolina State, they're also 327th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but South Carolina State doesn't have a single guy that's logging north of 10 points per contest. They're shooting 25.5% from three-point range with 15.7 turnovers per game. Mitchell Taylor is able to give you about 10 points per game on 12.5% three-point shooting. Really, the nicest thing I could say about South Carolina State is that Davion Everett down low and has been able to give you about 7 rebounds per game, but his backcourt is completely gutted with losing the likes of Lucian Holmes from the offseason. And for Furman, this is a little bit of a new-look team as well. You do lose guys like Jalen Slauson from a season ago, but JP Pigs, Marcus Foster, they're combining for a little bit over 40 points, 10.5 rebounds, 2.5 steals per game. Neither guy has necessarily hit their peak in terms of three-point shooting as well as a team. We've got a Furman team that's shooting about 41% from three-point range. They've been able to have Carter Witt dole out the ball a little bit more as well. Former top 200 recruit of Wake Forest has been able to give you a little bit over 3 assists per game. Clearly not the same guys as they had a season ago with Mike Bothwell and company, but I do think that he's going to be able to make a nice little bit of a contribution. Garrett Hine is someone with size that throughout his career shot it well from 3 right now. He's shooting about 20% from the outside. That should tick up as well, but I just flat out don't think that South Carolina State is going to be able to hold up their end of the bargain with regards to this total, just with the inconsistency from three-point range and Furman having more size down low. So this is a spot where I did set my line at 21. I'm going to be willing to lay the 20 with Furman. And with regards to this total, I think we've gone just a little bit far. I set my total at 165, so diving in on the under, and I'm going to be willing to lay it with Furman. 306-505, 306-506. Wagner is going to be on the road playing against Providence. Providence finds themselves as favorites of 20 to 21 points, and your total, it is 121.5 to 122, and I do think that we've gone a bit far with regards to this total. I did set mine at a 128.5. I'm going to be looking at the over, and with this Wagner team, they always do play very slow. They do have a defense-oriented style, but I do think that with this Providence team, they are going to be able to bust out a little bit. They had a little bit of a rough shooting start to begin the season, currently shooting about 30.5% from the outside, and the 15 turnovers per game, that is a little bit concerning. You've got pretty much a half and half mix of half the guys from George Mason following Kim English and half the guys from the old regime under Ed Cooley saying put like Devin Carter and Bryce Hopkins. And for Carter, the big thing for him is that he just needs to cut down on those turnovers, 3.7 per contest, and he's done well in everything else. 16 points, 7.5 boards, north of a steal, and a block per game. And right now you've got Josh Aduru shooting 71.5% from three-point range. That'll fall off, while Bryce Hopkins is currently shooting 18% from 3. That'll rise up as well. And now you've got Gary Newell back after he had that one-game suspension against Kansas State, or it might have been a different team that they were playing up against, but he had that one Bahamas game where he was out of the fold, but he is back. He's been able to be a solid freshman as a top 75 guy. He's able to shoot about 50% from three-point range. That'll fall off, but also a block and a half per game at 6'5". He's able to guard multiple positions. I like what he's able to bring to the table, but I do think that this number is a little bit lofty because even though I think that this total is a little bit low, this is a Wagner team that year in and year out is in the top 50 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and helping out the cause of this total and Wagner is that they're much more efficient with the ball. They're only turning it over about 9.5 times per game. You've had Melvin Council be able to give you 10 points per game as the main scorer, but Raheem Moore, he has been able to do more in the backcourt as well. Multiple assists, right around 9 points per contest, and for Council, more like 13 points per game out of him. You don't necessarily have that true rebounder on this team, but it's not like Providence had 7-footers either. So Wagner, with their little bit more versatility, with their just everyone grab a rebound sort of mentality, I actually think is going to vote halfway decent in this one. And then Julian Brown, I think he's a little bit of an upside guy. Shot about 43% from 3 coming off the bench a season ago. He's been able to give the team about 6 points per contest as well. So I do think that this is going to be a lower scoring game. I think we've gone a little bit too low with regards to the total. So I'm going to be taking a look at the over, set mine at a 128.5, and with Providence, going to make them an 18.5 point favorite. So I am going to be taking a look at the points, and I'm going to be taking a look at the over. 306-507, 306-508. Norfolk State is going to be playing us at William & Mary. You don't just get William, you don't just get Mary, but you get both, and you get between 3.5 and 4 points if you back them, with a total between 142.5 and 144, and this is a circumstance where I'm going to be taking a look at Norfolk State laying the points. I did set them as a 6-point favorite with William & Mary. They've been able to have some moments of brightness thus far this season, but you can tell that they're still trying to get past losing Ben White in the offseason. For William & Mary, they very much are living and dying by the three ball, with Gabe Dorsey shooting 49% from three after he shot 44% from distance a season ago, but able to get Noah Collier back in the fold as well. That's big because he was the team's top rebounder prior to going down with an injury last season. Missed the first 4 or so games of the season, and he's returned with about 13 points, a little bit over 5 rebounds per game, but it is a William & Mary team that really do rely upon that outside shooting, and if they're not getting those outside shots to fall, it does cause this offense to be a little bit disjointed, and it does cause for a little bit of volatility in general with this offense, because you'll notice in the last 4 games, they scored in regulation because their Air Force game went to overtime, 83 points in regulation, then they go out there, they score 62 points, they score 60 points, and then 96. So you get very much an all-or-nothing effort out of William & Mary. Meanwhile, for Norfolk State, this team has really not broken the 70-point plateau since their game against Hampton about 2 weeks ago. You've got Jamari Thomas, who comes in from UNC Wilmington. He's been able to help out the defense, and when Norfolk State has been able to make the NCAA tournament the last few seasons from the MEAC, it typically has been due to the defense. With Thomas, he's currently shooting 43% from 3. All in all, Norfolk State only shooting about 30% from 3-point range, but you have been able to get 7.5 points, 7.5 boards. Jelani Dardine, he's only about 6'7", so he's going to be a little bit outgunned against Noah Collier, but other than Collier, you don't necessarily have a ton of size with William & Mary. And for William & Mary, they're right now relying upon Charlie Williams to be their main facilitator. He's been able to give out right around 3.5 assists per game, has some versatility, but I do think that they could use a bit more out of Chase Lowe on that front. With Chase Lowe, he's been able to do a nice job with 14 points, 5.5 boards, 3 assists as a 6'5", a little bit of a do-it-all player after he was a primary reserve for the team a season ago, but I do think that with Norfolk State, having them have so many guys in the backcourt that are able to pop threes, Christian Ings 2 seasons ago shot 40+% from 3-point range, having Isaiah Chambers, who has been around this program for a very long time, he's able to pull in there about 4 or so rebounds per game. I do think that Norfolk State going to be able to hold up with their defense and slow down a William & Mary team that has been all over the place. I do think that this is going to be a game that's safe enough for late game fouling. Did set my total at a 144, so I do think that Norfolk State going to be able to rise up against a William & Mary team that last few years they've been quite inconsistent with their defense. So I'm going to be taking a look at this total over at Norfolk State. Set them as a 6-point favorite, so I'm going to be willing to lay the number 306-509, 306-510. The Citadel is playing us to Charleston Southern. Charleston Southern finds themselves as underdogs between 7 and 7.5 points. Total on this game is aiming between 132.5 and 134. And for the Citadel, I did set them as favorites of 6 points. So here at a 7 to 7.5, I'm going to be willing to take the points with Charleston Southern. Charleston Southern actually has a guy or two down low that I like in Tajay Sharp. He's been able to log about 7 or so rebounds per game going up against a Citadel team that Quentin Malora Brown is going to be the most impactful player in this game. He doesn't score a lot with only about 6.5 points per game, but comes in for Vanderbilt at 6'10". He's just got a really good skill set and makes winning plays. 2.5 assists, a block. He's able to pop some threes if you need him to as well. Very good, versatile player, and it's a big reason why the Citadel has been much better on defense in general after we all remember the Duggar Baucom days. This was a team that would give up 90 plus on the regular. Now you've got a Charleston Southern team that has been just all over the place with their offense as well. I talked about it in the last game with William & Mary, but you're seeing that with Charleston Southern as well. In their last 4 games against Division I competition, 70, 53, 73, and 56 points. So it's been up and down for them, but I like the fact that R.J. Johnson is able to do a nice job of being able to dole out the ball, 3.5 assists, 15.5 points per game, and currently is shooting north of 40% from 3-point range. You also bring in the South Florida transfer in DJ Patrick, who has logged 13.5 points per game, but it is a little bit of a top-heavy Charleston Southern team. You've got 3 guys averaging north of 13.5 points per game, and then 1 more guy that averages north of 5.8 points per contest. So there is clearly a big fall-off, and for Charleston Southern, they're shooting 38% from 3, but they're turning the ball over about 14.5 times per game as well. But the one thing about the Citadel is they're playing very slowly, they're playing better defense, but they really don't generate a lot of steals. It's only about 5 steals per contest. Winston Hill, the former Presbyterian big man, has been able to give you about 5.5 rebounds per game to help out Malora Brown down low. And then in the backcourt, you're relying upon Elijah Morgan along with A.J. Smith to be able to combine for about 29 points per game. Both of these guys shooting in the mid-30s from 3-point range. So it is a good old situation of something you got to give. Charleston Southern year in and year out finds themselves in the bottom 50 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. We've got a Citadel team that's given up 71 points or fewer, and now every one of their games, sans when they played against ACC schools when they gave up 75 to Boston College and 72 to NC State, which honestly, there's really not a lot of shame in. But that said, I'm going to be taking a look at the over. I did set my total at 134 because I just really do not trust in this Charleston Southern defense, and I'm going to be willing to take the points with this Charleston Southern bunch to be able to knock down a few threes. 306, 511, 306, 512. Louisiana Monroe is going to be playing us to Northwestern State. Northwestern State finds themselves as an underdog of 6.5 to 8 points, and your total is between 141 and seeing as high as a 142.5 with Northwestern State. I did set them as an underdog of 3 points, so I'm going to be willing to take the points with Tariq LaCour. It's going to be the best player out there on the floor. Tariq LaCour has been able to do a nice job with his versatility with about 11 points, 5 boards, 3 assists. He's been the do-it-all player thus far this season for Louisiana Monroe. And then Nika, I'm not even going to try to pronounce that last name. It's very, very long. It's like 15 letters. But Nika, the gentleman from Georgia, who stands right around 6'7", 6'8", he's able to give you some versatility. When he's fully healthy 2 seasons ago, he was able to shoot about 36% from 3 with 10.7 boards per contest. He's still trying to reacclimate himself a little bit, but he's been able to give this team some nice production in the post as well. But for Northwestern State, they did bring in a lot of junior college transfers, and Edison Patterson not being eligible / dealing with an injury, that really did hurt the team. But I like what I've been seeing in the backcourt out of Ryan Forrest. He has a true freshman, has really risen up with about 18 points per game, a little bit over a steal per contest. And for Northwestern State, the way that they're going to need to try to seal this game is via steals. They're generating about 8 of them per contest, only shooting 25.5% from 3. This is not a good shooting team, but I do think that they're going to be able to improve as the season goes along. You've also got Jameson Epps, who is a little bit of an under-the-radar junior college transfer that so able to log about 8 points, 8.5 rebounds per game. So I do like what he's able to do for the team as well. For Louisiana Monroe, you just don't have a lot of support for LaCour in the backcourt. You've been able to have about 8 points per contest out of Tyrese Watson, but for Louisiana Monroe, the 14 turnovers per game and the 29% three-point shooting, that's rough. Top of that, they're also shooting 56% at the free throw line. There's been a lot of teams shooting really badly at the free throw line, by the way, but I do think that for Northwestern State, with their ability to generate steals, with Louisiana Monroe being very sloppy with the ball in general, I do think that that is going to lead to Monroe having a tough time here. Monroe has been able to break the 63-point plateau against just one Division I opponent thus far this season. Meanwhile, Northwestern State, they have given up at least 78 points in every one of their games against D1 foes thus far this season. So something's got to give. I did set my total at 141, so here at a 142.5, diving in on the under. Both of these teams just have had a rough time with their shooting in general, so diving in on the under, and I'm going to be willing to take the points with Northwestern State. 306, 513, 306, 514. UAB is going to be playing us to McNeese. McNeese is a underdog of between 6 and 7 points. Your total is 141.5. With UAB, I did set them as an 8-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number. McNeese is right now bottom 5 team in the country in terms of total possessions per game. A little bit of that is a byproduct of the competition that they have been playing against, but you can tell that Will Wade is really wanting this team to play defense-oriented, even though they do bring in some scores from so many different places. Shahada Wells, he was over at TCU and UT Arlington. He has been the main man with 16 points, 2.5 steals, 3 assists per game, and it is a McNeese team that, despite them going slow, they have been efficient on the offensive side of things. 8.9 turnovers, shooting 40% from 3-point range. Christian Schulmate, he's the main holdover from last year's team at McNeese. 12.5 points, 9 boards, block per contest. He has been terrific down low, but I do think that they're going to meet their match against a UAB team that they like to crank up the tempo. They like to make you feel very uncomfortable, and I do think that Eric Gaines is going to be the best player out there on the floor. He does it all. Nearly 3 steals, 3 assists, 4 rebounds, 15 points per game. It's not shot well from 3. I think that that's going to be coming as a UAB team as a whole. It's only shooting about 28% from 3-point range. They clearly are missing Trey Jemison from season ago. He was a top rebounder. He was able to give you multiple blocks per game, but I like that they went and got junior college transfer Yaxel Lenneborg, who has been tremendous at 6'9". He's got good versatility. At the junior college level, pop threes. He has yet to hit one this season, but 8.7 boards. He's able to hop out down low along with what you've been able to get in terms of the 7 or so rebounds at 12.5 points out of Javion Davis as well. With the UAB, this team still does a solid job being able to generate about 7.5 steals per game. Tapered off a little bit from a season ago, but you still have been able to get a lot of production as well out of Alejandro Vasquez. Don't call his name, call him a man that scores about 11 points per game, and I do think that with this McNeese team, even though you do have guys like a DJ Richards who's able to pop it from 3-point range. I do think that we're going to see a little bit of a fall off there. I do think that for UAB, though, they're going to be able to get their style. I do think that they're going to be able to get a little bit more tempo, and I do think that this is going to be a game where we're going to be close enough to be able to get some late game following as well. I did set my line at 8, so I'm going to be willing to lay the points with the UAB, and with regards to this total, set mine at a 144. Looking at the over and willing to lay with UAB. 3-6-5-15, 3-6-5-16. Loyal Chicago plays those to Chicago State. Chicago State is a 15.5 point underdog. Totals between 142 and 142.5. With Chicago State, I did set them as an underdog of 13 points. Just have not been bullish in general on this Loyal Chicago team. There's a lot of people that they're trying to look at this team like there's still that bunch that was able to make those runs in the NCAA tournament a few seasons ago, and that's just gone. And for Loyal Chicago, what has been ailing them the last few years, it's been turnovers. 13.5 turnovers per game thus far this season. That really offsets the fact that each of their top 3 scorers right now are shooting north of 37.5% from 3 now. One of those top scorers in Philip Olsen. He's been out the last 3 games, and I expect him to be out once again in this game against Chicago State, which means that Wesley Cardet Jr. is going to have himself a little bit of a day. Wesley Cardet, former top 200 recruit of Stanford, has come in and has really transformed this program. 19 points, 5.5 boards, 2.5 assists per contest for a Chicago State team that only shoot about 26.5% from 3, but he and Joshua Corbett combined to shoot about 35 to 36% from the outside. Corbett at 6'7" is able to give you 7 boards per contest, and they've been able to get a lot more recently out of Deshaun Jean Carlos. He was having a little bit of a rough time to start the season, but for John Charles, he's been able to come in and has been able to give the team 4+ rebounds in 4 out of the last 5 games. Not necessarily a transformative scorer, shoots less than 30% from 3-point range, but at 6'7", offers some good versatility on the flip side for Loyal Chicago. You don't have a turn down low. Miles Rubin with his 5 rebounds is right now leading the way. Dame Edelkuhn, he comes in from Dartmouth as a 6'8", little bit of a combo player, where a season ago he was able to log more like 7 boards, 14.5 points per game, but I don't know how, I don't know why, but ever since you've had Cam Crutwig out of the fold, you just haven't had anyone for this Loyal Chicago team that's been able to rebound, and he's currently one of them. And Greg Dolan, he was doling out buckets a season ago at Cornell. He's had to take on a little bit of a lesser role, playing as a little bit more of a facilitator with about 4 assists, 7.5 points per game, still shooting 38% from 3, but you tell that feels like a little bit of fish out of water, and that's caused things to be a little bit clunky for this Loyal Chicago team, and they go up against the Chicago State bunch that has been able to generate about 9.5 steals per game, so I think that this is a little bit of a tough matchup. I'm going to be willing to take the points with Chicago State, set them as a 13-point underdog, and made this total 137. Chicago State the last few years has been a very slow-tempo team. Got a Loyal Chicago bunch that's given up 72 or fewer, and now 4 out of their last 5 games as well, and they've had their issues being able to put the ball in the basket as well. So going to be diving in on the under, and I'm going to be taking the points with Chicago State. 3-6-5-17, 3-6-5-18. Baylor is playing those to Nichols. Nichols is a 24.5 to a 25.5 point underdog, and your totals between 154 and 155. And with Nichols, I set this total at a 156.5 and them as a 26.5 point underdog. So we're going to lay with Baylor and taking a look at the over with this Baylor bunch. I'll talk about them a little bit more tomorrow with one of our good friends of the Locked On Big 12 podcast, Drake Toll, but I have been highly impressed by the freshmen and the way that they have been able to make an immediate impact for the team. Jacoby Walter has been your main scorer with about 18 points per game, but Yves Messi, he's been just all over the place. 9 points, 5.5 boards, 2 blocks, making really athletic plays. Right now for Baylor, out of your top 5 scorers, 4 of them are shooting at least 41.2% from 3-point range, and it's a different guy every night. One night it'll be Jacoby Walter. Next night, Ray J. Dennis will have his back. If you need Jalen Bridges to step up, he'll be able to do so. They've got so many interchangeable pieces that can be that guy, and they're better down low as well, with Josh Ijawana being able to take a nice leap forward, being able to give the team 5 rebounds per game. I mean, Jonathan John Machachua is right now glued to the bench, and they've still been very good down low. And then for Nichols, you've got Jamel West, who just has his hands full. He's a 6'6", do-it-all player that's been tremendous for this team, shooting north of 40% from 3, a block and a half, 18.5 points, 7.5 boards. You just go down the list. He's checking all the boxes. Where's all the help to be able to take the load off of him? Because for Nichols, they shoot about 36% from 3-point range, with West being one of those main guys. And you have been able to have Jalen White come in, shoot about 41.5% from 3. He's logged about 12 points per game, but really, other than what you're able to get out of West, this team is having a little bit of a tough time down low. You've had Deontay Smith log about 12 points, 5.5 rebounds per game, but this is a Nichols team that back when they were under the old regime, because you saw in the offseason Austin Clonch decide that he was going to be going from Nichols head coach to being an assistant over at Alabama. They had a lot of depth, and it just doesn't feel like they've got as much of that this year. You've been able to get right in the neighborhood about 6 points per contest out of Michael Gray Jr. He's been a little bit of a contributor coming over from George Mason, but the Sickles team, they're not generating as many steals as they did a season ago, and I do think that they're going to struggle with a Baylor team with just all this versatility and all this ability to swarm. And for Nichols, I do think that their defense, in for a very, very long night against a Baylor team, has scored at least 80 points in every one of their games this far this season. So take a look at the over, set my total at 156.5, and with Baylor, we'll lay up to 26 with them. 306-519, 306-520. It is Purdue, and they play us at Texas Southern. Texas Southern, an underdog of 31 points with your total at 137.5. Texas Southern I set as a 30-point underdog. So now that we've gotten to 31, I am going to be willing to take the points with Texas Southern, and no doubt, this is a Purdue team that's been absolutely tremendous in so many different facets of this game, but I do think that Texas Southern is going to be able to hold in there just a little bit, because we're starting to see a little bit more of Jonathan Cisse. He came over from Incarnate Word, where over at Incarnate Word, he was averaging about 14 points per contest, shot it well from three-point range, and that's big for a Texas Southern team that entered into last week dead last in the country out of 362 D1 teams in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. They're still only shooting about 26% from three-point range, and a ghastly 33.5% from the floor. It is going to be a case where this team is going to have a tough time down low as well. But Jameer Young, he is 6'11", began his career over at SMU and Memphis. I think he's going to be able to do a little bit better than expected against Zach Edey. He's still losing that battle. There's no question about it. Giant of the Earth, Zach Edey, coming off of being the player of the year last year, picking up right where he left off. 23 points, 11.5 boards, 3 blocks. He's just going to absolutely take over this game. But I do think that for Texas Southern, the defensive rotations are going to be a little bit better moving forward. You got a Texas Southern team that is currently 0-6, but they played to single digits on the road against Drake and Oral Roberts. They lose on the road against Arizona State by 11. They've been looking much better than they did ever since that opening night shellacking that they took against New Mexico. And for Texas Southern, you're going to need to get a little bit more out of PJ Henry, who's been very much a volume scorer, but he dealt with a little bit of an injury, was able to return in that Drake game, had 27 big points. Him coming back is a big reason why the team has been able to rise up a little bit more. And now you're getting more out of Deion Stroud as well. Stroud, a few seasons ago at Fresno State, the 2020-21 season, was a 12-point per game scorer. Now, he went into inferno mode, go with 20 points against Oral Roberts, and then proceeded to follow that up with 3 against Drake. So he's been inconsistent, but this is a guy that has a track record of being an impactful scorer on a Division I roster. Obviously, with the Purdue backcourt, Braden Smith has been doing it all. 6.5 assists, 12 points, 5.5 boards. Fletcher Lawyer is able to help out, and then you got guys like Trey Colvin and company. They have good versatility. Purdue is good to be able to host Texas Southern, a Texas Southern team that has had a tough time putting the ball in the basket, which was why I did set my total at 130, but Texas Southern typically hangs their hat on defense as well. So I think it's a low-scoring slog where Texas Southern just barely holds in there. I'm willing to take 31 with Texas Southern and the under. 306-521, 306-522. Arkansas State plays us to Jackson State. Jackson State is an 8 to an 8.5 point underdog with your total between 152.5 and 153. I did set my total at a 154. I'm going to be taking a look at the over with Jackson State. In fact, Ken Evans Jr. really do a nice job of being able to transform things, as he's been the main guy. You were expecting it to be Deshaun Ruffin, who was a former McDonald's All-American, a top 75 recruit going to an HBCU. It was really nice to see, but he went down with an injury before the season could even start. And for Jackson State, they've been able to tread water because Evans has been able to give you 19 points, 5 boards, 2.5 assists on 50% three-point shooting. Big reason why this team was able to get it done against Missouri. They were able to hold in there to single digits against Georgetown. Now, that's not saying a ton with the way that Georgetown is playing right now, but in this murder's row of a schedule that Jackson State has, as they have to take all these bye games to essentially fund all their other programs, they've been able to do a pretty admirable job. They're playing at an up-tempo pace, but not a breakneck pace, as they're right around 90th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Arkansas State has really ascended with their tempo. Last season, this was a bottom 75 team in terms of possessions per game. Brian Hodgson, he was an assistant over at Alabama. He takes over, and now the team is in the top 90 in terms of total possessions per game. Their possessions per game is up about 9 from a season ago. That's just absolutely ridiculous. Got a lot of transfers that have come in for Arkansas State. Freddie X, Sharon Todd, shot have been the main two. They've been able to log about 31 points per contest, with XC shooting 40.5% from three-point range now. It has led to turnovers. You've got a lot of moving pieces, a style that plays very, very much more quickly, so that has resulted in 14 turnovers per game. But DeAndre Dominguez, at 6'8", he's been able to log about 9.5 boards, 13 points per game, but he's not necessarily a truly gifted rebounder, and we're starting to see Zeke Cook be able to step it up for Jackson State as well. He, in the last 2 games, have combined for 18 rebounds, 23 points against Missouri, and Georgetown was a little bit hit or miss to begin the season. Not necessarily the tallest of guys at 6'6", but that's been a big reason why Jackson State has been able to hang in these games quite a bit more. You do have a Jackson State team that they themselves get sloppy with the ball with right around 14.5 turnovers per game, but I do think that Jackson State holds in there against an Arkansas State team that's completely makeshift, and for Jackson State, they've been cranking up the tempo as well. Arkansas State, they have been all over the place with regards to their defense, as they gave up just 58 points to UT Rio Grande Valley, but this team has given up 80 plus in all but 2 of their games thus far this season. So I did set my total 154, looked at the over and the points for Texas State, and we wrap things up with 306-523, 306-524. Marquette plays us to Southern. Southern's a 28.5 to a 29.5 point underdog. 147 to 148.5 is your total, and with Marquette, can only make them a 24.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to take the points with Southern. We've already seen Southern have a triumph on the road, being able to knock off UNLV in lovely Las Vegas, and for Southern, they're going to have a tough time down low, but that's the one place where Marquette does struggle. Oso Ogudero has been very good down low by himself. 15 points, 7.5 boards, a steal, a block per game, and this is for a Marquette team that they're going to shoot better when it's all said and done than 33% from three-point range, so it's only going to be able to get better and better for this Marquette team, but at the same time, this is a Southern bunch that they do a relatively solid job with regards to their perimeter defense. I like that they bring in Tayron Joseph. He, a season ago at Radford, where he was a little bit of a part-time starter, he was only able to average right around about 4.5 points per contest, but he's really been able to ascend this season. Southern had a homework last season to be able to generate turnovers, and they're in a little bit of a different coaching regime than a season ago, but that style has remained a constant. About 10 steals per game, been able to get really nice production with about 9.5 points per game out of Brandon Davis as well. He was playing over at Texas State a season ago as a main starter for them, and he, over the last 2 seasons, has shot about 38.5% from three-point range, going up against a Marquette team that they do appear to be much better on defense this year than a season ago. Tyler Kolek, he continues to be one of the most versatile guards in the country. 13.5 points, 5.5 boards, 5.5 assists, helping out a defense that they themselves have been able to generate right around about 9 to 9.5 steals per game, and I do think that for Marquette, we might see a little bit of a fall off on this defense, but I am starting to become much more of a believer in it. Last year, they were just a little bit all over the place. Now they're about 79th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, allowing just under 4 points fewer per 100 possessions than they did a season ago. And for Southern, they're currently 332nd in this category, but they are capable of generating steals, and typically when they've been hurt on defense, it's been because they don't have a single guy that gives you north of 4.5 rebounds per game. Going against this Marquette team without a ton down low, that should allow Southern to be remaining lively and a game to go a little bit more up-tempo. So I set my total at 150.5. Going to be looking at the over and the points with Southern, and that will wrap things up for the Tuesday edition of Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. If you do like hearing from this fine podcast, Coast to Coast Hoops, you're able to subscribe wherever your podcast, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you do have one of 2 ways we offer those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at unit_D1. Keep in mind, letters CM, they mean does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. There are other ways to find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. And then from there, you're able to fire on whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review, coming at you guys every single day throughout the college basketball season. That means I'm coming at you once again tomorrow. Thanks so much for tuning in.